discussions. Not all items listed may in fact be discussed, and other items not listed may also be brought up for discussion to the extent permitted by the open meeting law. We're going to begin tonight with our 6:45 continuation of license hearing for Conrad's Drive-In at 835 Massachusetts Avenue. So I'll ask the applicant to come forward, state your name and address. So the reason why we're here tonight is because we did not receive an application by the deadline in December, and then we noted that the business has continued to operate. So I just want to turn the floor over to you for any information you want to provide.
Great, thank you. David H. Leet, 835 Massachusetts Avenue, 149 Bowling Acres Road. I'm the general manager for Conrad's Drive-In, and I'm here representing that company tonight. We filled out our application in November, and at that time we had some troubles with our workers' compensation, which was part of the process, and we fulfilled that obligation. And at the present time, we do have some outstanding tax liability on both addresses. We are working diligently towards a refinance on one of our properties and plan to fulfill that obligation in its entirety within 90 days. So that's kind of where that stands at this present time. The COVID last year with the business, 20 out of 24 weekends it rained. It was absolute devastation. I've been out there myself 48 years. I've never seen a season like that. It was a major hardship. COVID, unfortunately, we fell in the cracks of COVID. We didn't qualify for any state or federal funding at all because we have a lot of part-time high school and college kids. We just didn't have enough full-time employees. So we've kind of like a double whammy. For the future, it looks bright. I think we can come out of this okay. We've been almost 80 years in operation in the town, and it looks promising. We don't have any mortgages on either one of those properties, so we're going to just take out a small amount of equity, satisfy the town in full, and take care of other creditors, and then move forward.
So I know that you've communicated over to our office that you believe that you should have all of this situated within the next 30 days, but a little more time in case something happens in the process.
And I appreciate it.
Makes sense. All right. So I think that we are, the hearing is a license denial hearing. I think that I'm going to turn to the board for any comments or questions that the board may have. I will state that I'm very much so inclined to approve a license tonight. I'm very much so inclined to approve a license tonight. I think that when you have a business that's been operating for 80 years, you guys have been a staple of the community. We all understand that, coming out of the pandemic, I hear exactly what you said. You guys have been stellar. We know that since the pandemic has happened that there have been some financial challenges. It sounds as if you guys are fully, you're not over leveraged. You have the equity that you guys can pull out. That resolves a lot of the concerns that I think this board has. And we know that, continuing to have an income will be positive. But I will turn to the board, my colleagues, for any comments or questions that they may have.
So I'll just say I'm very happy to hear that you're working towards resolving all of the issues that have prevented you from being able to apply for a license thus far. I have one question for the chair. Are you supporting a license now or once everything is worked out?
I, just as one member, I support a license now.
Is that an option? I don't know. With outstanding, as long as there's an agreement with a payment plan and that sort of thing, it's permissible?
Sure.
Okay. Okay, thank you, that's all.
So I do have a question. So you mentioned that you filled out an application in November, but we never received an application. Do we yet have an application?
I believe it was incomplete because the workers' comp was not provided in time for renewal.
Okay. When I asked if they had submitted one, I was told at the time they hadn't submitted one.
Because it was considered incomplete.
Okay. Well, I wasn't told that. That would have been a whole lot different than being told it wasn't sent. So we do have one.
I would have
Do
to
we
check the
currently
file.
have an application? Let's just start with that question.
I believe so. I'd have to check the file.
Okay. And all the requirements of the license, with the exception of the back taxes, have been fulfilled. It is paid for, and we believe we have the workers' comp and all the licenses. Is that correct?
The workers' comp was provided last week.
Okay. And so if those two things are true, then I am willing to go forward, but I do think we have to put a deadline on when this can be addressed. I'm not going to leave, I don't want to leave it open-ended. I've known Dave a long time, so I don't want to be the one here being the hard nose about it, but, you know, we have processes and we have things in place for reasons, so I'm willing to go and have them work it out, as long as we put a timeline of when it has to be resolved by.
All right. He mentioned 90 days, that would put us
Fine,
kind of
as long as there's a deadline.
Mr. Franco?
Yeah, I mean, I land exactly where Mr. Alonso lands. It can't be open-ended, and as long as there's an obligation and a deadline, so, you know, license contingent upon, I mean, granting it, but its continued existence is contingent upon meeting the obligations.
Okay, do you want to make that motion then, Mr. Franco? Or Mr. Alonso with those contingencies?
I move that we approve the license for Conrad's Drive-In at 835 Mass Ave, with the contingency that the back taxes have to be resolved or a plan in place no later than,
May 20th.
what?
May 20th.
May 20th. There we go.
Second.
Second.
All right. Any additional discussion? All right, as many as are in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. The motion passes, the license is granted. We will sign off on that. It should be available tomorrow, and then we will, you know, if we have any complications, we'll reach back out, but that provides you then with May 20th to get everything aligned, and again, as a credit to the time that you've been in business here in the town, and thank you for coming forward.
Thank you so much for your, thank you. I can't, Good Friday, great fish. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we'll pass that down later when we do our warrants. All right, we do have a 7 o'clock appointment, but we're going to go up to communications from other boards. This is kind of, it could be on our announcements, but what we did receive was we received, I'm going to read it. It's a lengthy, I won't say lengthy, it's a detailed and thorough update from the Lunenburg Water District. And so I will read this update. It was dated February the 14th. And again, I will read that into the record and to inform those at home. So coming from the Lunenburg Water District, again, this services many residents in our community, and this is a director's update. So current products and initiatives, and why we're reading this is related to the money that the select board committed for ARPA funds that the select board committed to assist the Lunenburg Water District for this purpose. So PFAS Water Master Plan. The Lunenburg Water District consultant Ty & Bond has engaged the services of Capital Strategic Solutions, also known as CSS, to aid in educating the community about the water system and the necessity of having redundancy in the water system to safeguard public health. This proactive measure is taking place in light of the Environmental Protection Agency's proposed new rule on PFAS, I'm not going to butcher that, what it stands for, that is anticipated to go into effect in early 2024. The EPA is proposing to set the health-based value, the MCLG or PFOA and PFOS at 0. So the PFAS Water Master Plan webpage is in development. There's a development of a PFAS brochure is in progress. Scheduling meetings with municipal departments, boards, committees, and community organizations is currently underway. Development of a town-wide mailer is in progress. Ty & Bond is performing a thorough assessment of the water distribution systems and wells to develop a long-term plan for treatment and remediation of PFAS from our water. Our first priority is to protect public health and safety, be good stewards of our financial resources, and ensure that our stakeholders are well informed and involved in the decision-making process to provide the best possible solution for state and federal regulatory compliance. Also, Massachusetts Ave Water Main Replacement Project. The Massachusetts Avenue Water Main Replacement Project contractor has been selected. The contractor, MDR Construction, is anticipated to begin construction activities in the spring of 2024. The work is expected to have a minimal traffic impact. However, this work will require the installation of temporary water main bypass piping. All planned service interruptions will be coordinated with impacted properties and with the schools. System flushing. The Lunenburg Water District will begin system flushing in the spring of 2024. Water main flushing moves water systematically through sections of the drinking water distribution system, creating a scouring action to clean the line. The increased flow rate scours the water pipe's inner walls and helps to remove buildup of naturally occurring debris and sediment. The water is discharged through select fire hydrants onto local roads or other surface areas. The process is critical to the overall maintenance of a distribution system and is one of the most important practices carried out by public drinking water systems to maintain high water quality, improve the carrying capacity of pipes, and ensure proper operation of distribution system components such as hydrants and valves. Flushing the water main lines also ensures that fire hydrants are operational and allows the operator to assess the available water pressure and flow rate for firefighting purposes. And then updating mapping through GIS. The Lunenburg Water District is working with Fuss & O'Neill to update our Geographic Information System, also known as GIS. The GIS system is used to gather, manage, and analyze data based on geographic location of our water mains, valves, etc. The GIS platform provides location-aware data visualization and analytics in real time to assist us in managing the infrastructure and allow for a more concise view of the water operations. The equipment used for this was purchased with a grant through Mass DEP. And then they have a note about staffing. The Water District is looking to hire an individual to join their team. It's an entry-level position. The candidate must live within a 20-minute commuting distance of the Water District's office and must be on call as needed. Starting pay is $24 per hour for a 40-hour work week. Local residents are encouraged to apply. Resumes can be mailed or dropped off at the Water District's offices located at 496 Mass Ave, or emailed to lunwat, which is LUNWAT, at verizon.net. And I want to thank the Water District for providing this update to us, that we were happy to read into the record and inform the public at this session about those important updates. All right, we're going to go to our 7 to 8:30 appointment. This is going to be a joint meeting with the Select Board. I will ask the chairs of the school committee and the finance committee to join us up here, if present. I'm looking for Evan. All right.
I hear someone on the stairs.
Second.
I hear someone on the stairs.
Okay. So I'm going to turn it.
There's someone.
Excellent. So we have Evan coming up now. Excellent. So we're joined by Evan Waters and Carol Archambault, respective chairs of the school committee and finance committee. And I will turn to the chairs for to open up your meetings.
I will call this meeting of the Lunenburg School Committee to order. In attendance are members Peter Beardmore, Laura Brzezowski, and Tony Sculombrini, as well as myself, Carol Archambault.
And I will open the Finance Committee meeting. In attendance, we have myself, we have Tom Gray, and over Zoom, we should have Dave Passios, Chris Bernard, and I don't see Renee, but I believe Renee should be there as well.
Okay.
Tiffany?
Tiffany?
You mean Tiffany?
Tiffany's not, is absent tonight.
Oh.
Okay.
Sorry, not Renee. Jean! It's been a long day. Jean, I apologize if you're on there.
All right. Excellent.
What do I get for sitting next to Renee?
Yeah.
There's a new agenda item for the FinCom this Thursday.
All right. If I can get there we go. All right, so I'm going to introduce the delegation that we have here tonight, and I will start by reading some very abbreviated bios that I did ask them to send forward. So we're joined tonight by Senator Cronin, by Representative Senator John Cronin by Representative Michael Kuchmarek and by Representative Margaret Scarsdale. So first, welcome. Thank you for being with us this evening at the Lunenburg Select Board and also with the School Committee and Finance Committee. So the general format of tonight is we're going to begin by hearing your legislative updates. We will then turn over to the School Committee. The School Committee will have about 20 minutes to interact with the delegation. We'll then turn to the Finance Committee. Finance Committee will have about 20 minutes to interact with the delegation. And then the balance of the time will remain with the Select Board and also with the chairs. So starting, and I should have put these in an order here, but I'm going to start with Senator Cronin. So Senator John Cronin is a graduate of the United States Military Academy at West Point and Suffolk University Law School. Prior to election to the Massachusetts Senate, Senator Cronin served as an infantry officer and as a combat veteran of the war in Afghanistan. He was honorably discharged from the United States Army as a captain in 2018 and worked as a veterans advocate at a legal services center in Boston. Cronin's legislative agenda aims to revitalize gateway cities, spur housing production, and build a broader middle class through workforce development pathways. And John was raised in Lunenburg and is a graduate of Lunenburg High. So I'll turn over to Senator Cronin to provide a legislative update and a welcome.
Thank you very much, and I want to start by thanking all the members of the Select Board for inviting us here tonight, and the Chair of the Finance and the School Committee. It's an honor to work with this legislative team, the Lunenburg delegation, both Representative Kuchmarek and Representative Scarsdale. Everything we do, we do together, and we take that really seriously to speak with one voice to advocate for the town. As you mentioned, I am really proud to have been born and raised in Lunenburg. I love this town, and it's not just a professional priority for me, but it's a personal priority to deliver resources and make sure that this town and its residents can meet its full potential. With that said, we are in a different fiscal environment in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts than the last year that we were before you. Speaking at a very high level, at the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic, one number that I've seen is approximately $115 billion of federal aid and emergency relief found its way into Massachusetts through PPP loans, the CARES Act, ESSER funds, ARPA money, and all those dollars made its way to the state coffers, made its way directly to town coffers. It showed up in the sales tax, and it resulted in years of surplus revenues at the state level, the likes of which many of my colleagues who have been at Beacon Hill for decades had never seen before, and we may never see again. That is not the environment we are in right now in this fiscal year. So we are beginning our fiscal year 25 budget process. There is a consensus revenue number that really represents us coming back down to earth. The governor has issued fiscal year 24 9C cuts, and what that means is money that we appropriated last summer and that the governor signed into our fiscal year 24 budget are being clawed back because revenue collections are not keeping up with our projections. So it's important to note that the state is not in a recession. We are not in a recessionary environment. We projected in fiscal year 24 1.6% growth in the Commonwealth for our tax collections. We're experiencing 1.2% growth. So we've got a very healthy stabilization fund of $8 billion. That's a record. But because we're not in a recessionary environment, we're not going to be able to, as of right now, there are no plans to go into those funds because it would affect our bond rating and the state's and the Commonwealth's ability to borrow. So one thing that we will return to over the course of tonight, I'm sure, is how do we deliver more and how do we do more for Lunenburg? Towns across my district, I represent 10 cities and towns in north central Massachusetts. Every town is grappling with the same issues. One-time ESSER funds are not going to be there for next year's budget. And we are coming back down to sustainable levels of growth, and we are faced with bad choices and painful choices. And state government is coming out of years of surpluses in the billions, and our revenue collections are not keeping up with our benchmark and what we projected. All that paints a dreary picture, all of which is a long way of saying, I think this conversation and this dialogue between the state and you, our local leaders, and I'm so grateful for your leadership and your partnership, is really important. It's important for us to establish priorities, our shared priorities, and it's important for us to advocate together as we come up with the fiscal year 25 budget. Both Representative Kushmarek, Rep. Scarsdale, and my office, we work every day to make sure we are speaking with one voice. And as the House takes up its budget in April, as the Senate takes up our budget in May, as the two conference committees come together in June, and hopefully not into July, but into the summer, to get a final budget to Governor Healy's desk, this dialogue from tonight, our shared priorities, the challenges that the town is facing, we look forward to continuing that dialogue and to continuing to, as I said, deliver everything we can for this town. So with that, I'll yield back, but again, I'm grateful for all your leadership, your willingness to serve this community. I know these are thankless jobs. I have a lot of memories in this room that are happy of my dad serving on the select board, and a lot of less happy memories of him losing by 7 and then 11 votes. So it's tough work, but I'm grateful for all your partnership and look forward to this conversation tonight.
Thank you, Senator Cronin. I want to introduce Representative Scarsdale. Representative Scarsdale is a longtime community leader who's passionate about public service. In her hometown of Pepperell, she served as chair of the Pepperell Select Board, and prior to that was chair of the Light, Air, and Noise Bylaw Committee. She also successfully led the effort to stop a toxic dirt project in her hometown. Representative Scarsdale ran an innovative downtown revitalization program in Air, overseeing over $1 million in community development block grant funds, and also taught in the classroom for many years. As state representative, Margaret Scarsdale has secured over $4 million in funding for her towns, created a regional collaborative focused on economic and community development, fostered regional collaborations among town clerks, councils on aging, agricultural commissions, and more. She serves on 4 joint committees and successfully shepherded several local bills through the legislative process during her first year in office, which is quite the accomplishment. Representative Scarsdale proudly serves the First Middlesex District, which includes Ashby, Dunstable, Groton, Lunenburg, Pepperell, and Townsend. Representative Scarsdale.
Well, good evening, everyone. I echo Senator Cronin's introductory remarks about how honored I am to be here and to thank you for your service. It is not easy in the best of times, and certainly in trying times, it's much more difficult. I am so honored to serve this district and to show up every day to do just that, to serve. And that encompasses a wide range of things, from participating in Lunenburg's Town Cleanup Day, to reading to Lunenburg preschoolers and talking to Lunenburg high schoolers, to attending Lunenburg Business Association events. I am really all in to get to know Lunenburg, to understand Lunenburg, and to help brainstorm solutions and be a strong partner. In my 13 months in office, I have held over 40 office hours. I started out doing all 6 towns every month and quickly realized that wasn't sustainable, so I alternate. I do 3 towns and then 3 towns and then back to the first 3. Those have just been phenomenally successful. I think people are very excited to meet their representative and to understand that they are talking with someone who genuinely cares about their concerns. And I will take that opportunity to say this entire delegation is like that, and I could not be more honored to serve with Senator Cronin and Representative Kushmarek, because this work is a passion for them, and it is a commitment, and it's truly an honor to serve with them. Chair Jeffries, you mentioned some of the regional partnerships that I had built or have built. I want to say that the underlying premise of all of those is to bring the 6 towns together, groups that face similar challenges but have never talked to each other. The town clerks had never met, other than around an election to talk about a specific problem, never looking long range. The veteran services officers had never done that. Our food pantries and council on agings haven't done that. The Regional and Economic Community Development Group that I founded last May is that same kind of premise. How can we understand challenges and take advantage of opportunities? But I think the most important thing out of all of them is that it's a way to imagine the future and to build strong, resilient, sustainable communities, and that has been wildly successful. For legislatively, I voted for and supported multiple budget items that have a direct impact on our towns, increasing the senior citizen circuit breaker from $1,000 to $2,000, greatly increasing DCR, Department of Conservation and Recreation funding, so that our rail trails and our open spaces and public places where people can gather can be maintained and made accessible to the public. Of particular interest to Lunenburg, I filed the means-tested senior citizen tax exemption bill, which was co-sponsored by Senator Cronin and Rep. Kushmarek. That is now in the House in the third reading, so very close to the finish line, and I am looking forward to giving a call to Heather to let her know that that is across the finish line. That, like everything else, is a team effort. I couldn't have done it without the support of the delegation. Heather was wonderfully helpful in giving me information when I needed it. In closing, I want to say that having served as the chair of the Pepperell Select Board, I understand in a very real way what you are experiencing and what you are facing. Having a town budget, trying to meet the needs of multiple town departments, and making sure that we're paying our employees a living wage and taking care of our schools. You have to balance that against the reality that your town, like my other 5 towns, you're 94 to 97% of residential tax base. And what that translates to is that everything in that budget pretty much falls on the backs of taxpayers. It falls on the backs of senior citizens and struggling families and young families that are just trying to, get started in a community. So those are very real struggles and very real challenges. I was going to say we're kind of like a 3-legged stool, but maybe we're a multi-legged stool, because the solution and finding a way forward is going to require the select board and the school committee and the finance committee and this delegation and the citizens of Lunenburg, which have been really proactive about reaching out to the delegation as well to let us know their thoughts about this budget. So we're here to listen, we're here to learn, and we're here to be a strong partner for you as we move forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Scarsdale. And I want to also introduce Representative Kushmarek. Mike Kushmarek began his tenure as state representative for the 3rd Worcester District in January 2021. Prior to his role in the state legislature, Mike served as a Fitchburg City Councilor from 2014 to 2021, including 5 years as council president, during which time he became Fitchburg's youngest ever council president. Fueled by a passion to provide the region's residents with access to affordable higher education opportunities, Mike has held positions in higher education administration and development at Northeastern University, Worcester Polytech Institute, and Fitchburg State University, where he earned a bachelor's degree and a master's degree in history. As a high school dropout and the product of a home that battled substance abuse, mental health, and homelessness, Mike is passionate about dismantling financial and socioeconomic barriers to successes and ensuring that everyone has an equitable opportunity to pursue their dreams and goals. As state representative, Mike proudly serves as the vice chair of the Joint Committee on Tourism, Arts, and Culture Development, and sits in the Public Service, Human Resources and Employee Engagement, and Mental Health, Substance Use, and Recovery Joint Committees. And I want to welcome Representative Michael Kushmarek for being with us this evening.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Truly appreciate the opportunity, and just, I'll reiterate just how thankful I am to the municipal elected officials sitting here in front of me. I know you certainly don't do it for the palatial offices and the lavish salaries. You do it because you love your community. You do it because you wake up every day and see the opportunity for your town to improve and for you to improve the lives of the residents and businesses that you serve each and every day. So thank you for continuing to wake up and do that every day. You make your town a special place, and literally and figuratively, we could not be here without your work and your service, and also to our municipal employees as well, who do the work day in and day out. Mr. Chairman, as you mentioned, I sat on the other end of the table for about 7.5 years as a city councilor, and got to be there during the tough times when the street lights were turned off in my home city, and the potholes remained unfilled, and that's still an ongoing challenge to this day. And got to see some of the good times when the budgets grew, and so I don't envy those days and the situation we're in when the projections fail, when the budget realities fail to meet the projections. As you mentioned, I grew up with humble beginnings, and so I reflect on just what it's been like 3 years now, returning back to this same room, and never thought I'd be in this kind of situation in my lifetime of going from high school dropout to sitting in front and working alongside municipal leaders as a state representative, and along what I consider to be the very best delegation in the entire Commonwealth. Truly, Senator Cronin is the very best senator, and we are all privileged to work with him each and every day. I don't think there's anybody better in the Senate doing what they do. And truly, I've never seen somebody work so hard as a first-term state representative as Representative Scarsdale. And together, I think, just the constant collaboration and communication by text, email, Zoom, Teams meetings, and it's really never-ending. And this isn't a show for the viewing public. This is, I think, what we say and what we do here in a collaborative manner, and speaking with one voice is truly who we are, and we enjoy doing it. And so, I think you've heard the fiscal picture, and you've heard the collaborative approach all the way down from Beacon Hill down to the micro level of how we collaborate between state and municipal government. And then we certainly have the legislative piece. And sitting here today, 3 years in, I'm in my 37th month, and with that I filed 37 pieces of legislation in that time, and I just went through the list today, just looking at the breadth and scope of things that we work on. And most of my bills have been filed alongside these two incredible colleagues, and certainly mental health, given my upbringing, is something that is near and dear to me. But also heavily reinforced by my experience and time in Mary Foyle's classroom with her civics students these past 3 years, and really just had the joy and privilege each term or semester of joining her students. And the number one overwhelming issue that they expressed to me was the need for continued emphasis, funding, and resources on mental health, and so it was such a joy to be able to talk with them, and there's certainly the silver lining of it's both concerning that is the number one issue for our young men and women, but on the other hand, it's a topic that never would have been discussed when I was in school and when most of us were in school. So I also see that as a blessing, that the dialogue has moved so substantially that is a topic that is on the tip of most students' tongues. They're willing to talk about it, remove the stigma, and address it head on. And so I filed 8 different pieces of legislation, everything really aimed at improving access and services, ensuring insurance parity, so that mental health and behavioral health and substance use recovery are treated just the same as physical health in the eyes of insurers and doctors alike. ensuring that maternal mental health is finally addressed in an equitable manner in Massachusetts, and ensuring that there's more than just a checkbox that gets checked at annual mental health visits for mothers who have recently given birth. We also look at things like expanding treatment options to kids in foster care and in acute care settings, as well as aggregate care settings, children who are living with 20 or 30 other children, looking at what can we do better and how do we better get at the issues that are plaguing our adolescent population when it comes to mental and behavioral health. That said, mental health, substance use, and recovery are but one of the many topics that this delegation is really passionate about tackling. Unitil and ever increasing energy costs plaguing our businesses and residents of this region is certainly first and foremost among our list of priorities. We filed together, the three of us, the Muni Choice Bill, which was rewritten, redrafted just in the past session, and refiled with New Hope, building collaborations with grassroots organizations and legislative colleagues, as well as energy and policy regulators across the Commonwealth. And in the face of yet another rate increase filing this past winter, or this current winter, we engaged with the Attorney General's office and brought her to Lunenburg, where Attorney General Campbell and I believe 11 members of her staff were here present to really engage with our senior community and our business community to really talk about what both this delegation as well as the State Attorney General's office can do to be firm in the face of Unitil, to use every regulatory and legislative tool possible to ensure that we keep the rates as low as possible for our residents, and then also, while doing that, to seek what are our alternatives in the face of Unitil. This delegation's also taken on, and I'm proud to have filed along Senator Cronin, the most expansive effort to modernize and reform Chapter 115 benefits for our veterans community. This was conceived by Senator Cronin, and together we've put forth, along with the governor and her administration as well, what I believe to be a really substantive piece of legislation that I'm incredibly optimistic can change the lives of tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of veterans across the Commonwealth. And additionally, we've worked to address workforce pipelines for law enforcement, to work more cooperatively with the Mass Association of Superintendents. I filed 7 different pieces of legislation aimed at education, 4 of which were done with this Association of Superintendents, really aimed at towns like Lunenburg to help with state reimbursement lines to increase funding as well as thresholds for both transportation, circuit breaker reimbursement, and approved cost thresholds. And 4 of those that I've just mentioned came as a direct result of our discussions the past 2 years, where we heard you and we went back to the body and went back to our collaborative colleagues outside of the legislature as well to conceive how can we really get at the issues that are plaguing communities like Lunenburg and the school budgets, and how do we ensure that we both have fair, equitable, and resourceful special education without it coming at the expense of the public school systems. And I believe we've crafted thoughtful legislation to do exactly that. And, you know, I think Rep. Scarsdale also mentioned we worked on an expansive $1 billion tax relief plan that was passed by both branches of the legislature and signed into law just in the past year. And that $1 billion really was aimed specifically at working class and middle class families and businesses, ensuring that we keep Massachusetts competitive, give Massachusetts the opportunity for its workforce to grow, but also ensure that we're not leaving behind our seniors and our most vulnerable, our young parents, and ensuring that there's child care credits and expanding the senior circuit breaker. These are all things that keep communities intact and ultimately make Massachusetts both more livable as well as more competitive for the future, and drawing more people to stay and to move here, which are truly important. And lastly, I think you saw the first, and we're just seeing the first wave of fair share of funding hit our communities. I know this may not come as a shock to any of you, but Fitchburg traditionally has had a huge issue with roads. So Chapter 90 funding is on the tip of everybody's tongue in Fitchburg. But the reality is, while it's maybe the #1 issue for Fitchburg, it's on everybody's top 5 across every select board and city council across the Commonwealth. They're worried about, how do we pave our roads? It's the fundamentals. How do we pave our roads? How do we ensure that we have quality education? And so, as a legislature and working hand in hand with the governor's administration, we've really worked to ensure that we're bringing real dollars out of the fair share amendment that was passed at the ballot just 19 months ago, not even, and ensure that we're delivering those dollars back. So I think it was $240,000 extra dollars this year for Lunenburg in the form of Chapter 90, whether it's for paving roads or buying those front-end loaders that every town needs, or looking to invest in better transportation to school in the form of crosswalks and sidewalks. Those are critical funds that allow you some additional flexibility. While that's the first year of funding, I know this delegation stands ready and willing to continue to go back to fight for bread and butter funding out of fair share funds and the budget moving forward. So I'll just close again by expressing my gratitude to each and every one of you for having us here yet again, for engaging with us constantly, not just at the once-a-year meeting, but frequently throughout the year. And just thankful to the opportunity to engage in these tough but really crucial conversations. Thank you.
Thank you. And I know that this board will have an opportunity later to again ask any questions, but I do want to pause just to provide my colleagues with an opportunity now if they have any clarifying questions or want to extend any opening comments as well.
Long way to our turn.
All right. We're going to go to Ms. Carol Archambault for the school committee.
All right, is there a member of the school committee that would like to make a comment? I'm sure there is. Mr. Beardmore?
I don't want to speak with my back to you, so if you guys don't mind, I'll do it this way. Is that all right?
We don't mind.
That's fine.
Before I get started, for the benefit of those in the audience and watching on TV, I think most of the committee members of the committees who are present tonight know the town manager's budget was published last week. It'll be talked about later on tonight at this meeting, and it'll be presented at tomorrow night's finance committee meeting, and will continue to be discussed in the coming weeks. I would encourage people to attend or watch that meeting, because we have many interesting things to discuss in the coming weeks and months, but in particular tomorrow night. Before we get started tonight, Representative Scarsdale and I were talking lightly about the use of metaphors and such to get across an idea. And she used the term a three-legged stool in her remarks. And so the theme of my comments tonight are, the stool is wobbly. And the stool is wobbly because the state's leg is too short.
What type of stool are you talking about, Peter?
The kind of stool you would sit on, but that's a very good question, Senator Craig. The three-legged stool, yes.
Gotcha.
Yeah. And it's wobbly because the state is not keeping up with commitments that it made very long ago. There was also a running joke between some of the members of these committees about how long it would take. There was an over-under, actually, of about 5 minutes to when one of you brought up circuit breaker funding. And I should have taken the over, because it actually took a lot longer than I anticipated. And I'm encouraged to hear about any opportunity that we can have to get more revenue from the state. But frankly, I think that we've had a lot of conversation, and you folks have spent a lot of time talking about funding that is in the margins. And the heart of the matter that we really need to talk about is Chapter 70. Chapter 70 was critical to the discussion that happened way back in 1980 when Proposition 2.5 was first passed. And the discussion was that the state would be a partner for local communities. And in times of high inflation, when the state coffers were increased, the state would be able to contribute more. Well, a lot of things have happened since that time. You know, the SOA passed a few years ago. And the argument then was made that there are communities in the state of Massachusetts that really need help. But ultimately, this will be a rising tide that lifts all ships. How many times did we hear that in the year or so leading up to the passage of the SOA? And since the SOA has passed, we have poured an awful lot of money into education in the state of Massachusetts, particularly into gateway communities. But the formulas are such that towns like Lunenburg are considered to be wealthy communities. And the formulas and the theory behind the SOA, as it has turned out, is that it is actually designed to force communities like Lunenburg to pass overrides to pay more money in local contributions to education, while the state does not pay its fair share or meet the obligations that my stool metaphor was intended to connect us to. That's the reality of the situation, and that is the world that we're living in. We are living with 2.5% caps in Proposition 2.5, and in Chapter 70, we are annually seeing about 1.5% a year, which directly correlates to a $60 per student hold harmless number that we are given. $60 a year in increase because we are the wealthier communities. That $60 is less than 1/3 of 1% of what it costs to educate a student in Lunenburg in a given year. So I can't imagine how that was anybody's intention for the state to meet its obligation that it made many, many years ago to towns like Lunenburg. So the question is what should that number be? We were told when I was on the Finance Committee a few years ago that it took forever for SOA to happen, the Student Opportunity Act, for those of you who are not keeping score. And we're not going to be able to fix that for a good long time because it took so long for that to occur. I think that hold harmless number is the key here, that we need to fix that number. And it shouldn't be $30, which it was a few years ago, or $60, which it is now. It should be a number that is bracketed to some sort of index. It could be inflation, it could be the CPI, it could be, I don't know what it should be. There are much more smarter people than I am to figure this out, but it needs to be bracketed to reality because $60 a year per student is not realistic. Finally, I want to bring this back to earth. And I want to focus on the commitments that we've made to each other and the commitments that the people in the town of Lunenburg have made, not only to our schools, which are, by the way, in the top third of the schools in the state of Massachusetts, while well below 20% in per pupil spending. We do very well, and we have met those commitments and we have met those obligations. And, you know, when we're coming back to earth and thinking about all of the new programs and all of the new spending that have come about in the state of Massachusetts over the last few years, let's think about the commitments and the obligations that were made before COVID, before the era of exploding budgets and exploding revenues. And let's get back to basics and renew that partnership. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Peter. Is there another member of the school committee that would like to speak? Okay, so what I'm going to do is I know I have time later, but I'll do it now, so that will leave more time for my other colleagues to speak at another time. So Senator Cronin, Representative Kushmarek, and Representative Scarsdale, thank you for joining us this evening. Regarding our local budget, I will mirror Mr. Beardmore and say I want to advocate to citizens concerned with the town manager's preliminary budget to attend tomorrow evening's FinCom meeting. here at 7 p.m. With the situation of cuts on the school side, well beyond the expected and planned for ESSER cuts, in this budget and growth, albeit small, on the town side, it is obvious that the mechanism for school funding does not work in Lunenburg. Perhaps it works in other communities, but not in towns like ours. And as I've spoken to this esteemed group of legislators over the last few weeks, towns like ours are all in trouble. It's not just us. Lunenburg is 41 from the bottom in per pupil spending out of 400 districts, which includes charters. So just think about that. 41 out of 400 from the bottom in what is spent per pupil. I checked again this afternoon to make sure my math was right. We are 96th from the bottom out of 321, no charters included, in spending above the foundation budget. We can't do this alone. They are not being extravagant on the town side. We need more help from the state. When I recently contacted you, our state delegation, about our financial difficulties, I was told there was not a lot we could do right now, that my timing was off, that I should have contacted you last fall. So I'm early for next year. Whatever can be done, whatever was supposed to have been done, if I had shown up last October, I'm there now. I didn't know that I had to be there last October. I do now. Whatever needs to be done, we need to start on this soon, because this is not going to get any easier. We have submitted earmark requests to the town. I was told that was one thing we could do at this point in time. We trust we will have an opportunity to get an earmark request move forward to you. I appreciate your consideration regarding earmarks and moving forward the urgency to the state of education and the state in our community to the state at large. I appreciate your time. Thank you. And I will hand it back to you.
I will pause, since you do have 10 minutes remaining in your time, for the delegation if they want to reply.
Oh, Mrs. Brzezowski has decided she would like to speak.
Okay.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Laura Brzezowski, School Committee. I wasn't here. This is my first year on the school committee, but I watched the meeting from last year. We brought up the same issues. We're here again saying the same things. Same people sitting here, a lot of the same faces, same issues. It hasn't been fixed. There hasn't been a lot of progress, if any. That's really frustrating. Last year, Carol talked at length about the ESSER funds ending and how we were facing a cliff and how we were going to need extra state support. And we're still here. The thing I really wanted to state was we're not the only town facing this issue. We're not the only town in your districts facing this issue. I would argue that I think almost all the towns in your districts are facing this issue. It's statewide, which means that these budget shortfalls are a statewide issue and it needs to be fixed at a state level. We're working on it from the town side as best we can. We're limited in what we can do, but the state needs to step in and help us. Massachusetts has the best schools in the country. It wasn't by accident. It was because we prioritized schools in Massachusetts, because we funded schools in Massachusetts. We're not going to be the best schools in the country if we don't fund them appropriately. If we continue at this level of just resting on our laurels and saying everything's great, the towns will carry it all. We can't keep doing that. The state is failing its elementary and secondary school students. It is not prioritizing education. K through 12 education is one of the basic things that Massachusetts government needs to do. It's in the state constitution. I would really like it if you guys could focus on that function of government and make that a priority, because we're having a really hard time making up the difference at a town level. So, thank you.
Thank you, Carol. Thank you, Laura. I want to offer the delegation. I know there weren't too many direct questions there, but I think there was plenty to respond to. We have about 6 minutes here on this.
I'm happy to, I'm happy to take the first go at it, and certainly, Madam Chair, I appreciate all of your efforts and your communication over the past couple of months, and certainly Member Beardmore has certainly engaged myself and I believe the delegation very thoughtfully about what the challenges are and what potential solutions might look like moving forward. And so truly appreciate those efforts. And so I think there's certainly a few things here, and the collective thought and sentiment around the challenges of Chapter 70, we certainly understand. I mean, it's since Senator Cronin and I took office, you know, we've seen nearly $1 million increase in Chapter 70 and a $1.35 million increase in the cherry sheet. And we're not doing that. I'm not saying this is a victory lap. We're understanding right there that we're trying to make up for decades of really stagnation in Chapter 70 and of local aid. And it's not reversed overnight. And now we're running into that road, into the headwinds of a state fiscal environment where the funding and the revenues are slowing down. And yet the challenges, as we know, in our town halls and in our school administration buildings are still very much there. And so, you know, with the sunsetting of ESSER dollars across the state, we're seeing that in nearly every school district, right? Seeing it most profoundly in those school districts that used it for ongoing recurring revenue and payroll, which is what we're seeing here. And so what we know is that we're going to need to find a solution that really fits for rural and suburban school districts like Lunenburg, and I think Rep. Scarsdale seeing this in almost every single municipality that she represents. And we're certainly working with our colleagues in like-minded and in similar situated communities. And I appreciate that, Madam Chair, you've expressed with us of the ability and hopefully that between the legislative collaborations, we can also work with the Mass Association of Superintendents, as well as the Mass Association of School Committee, to figure out what is that common solution. And so we can try to Band-Aid for individual communities. That's unlikely to work, so it's figuring out, all right, what are the systemic fix that will work for the 120, 150 so communities that may fall into this similar situation. And we certainly stand ready and willing as a delegation to continue working with you. And, you know, we hope at some point to have a singular or a refined list from the superintendent as to what some of those requests might look like as well, through the superintendent and through the Superintendent's Association. But certainly I appreciate the work that the school committee has done in communicating these needs.
Thank you.
Evan.
Are there any members of the Finance Committee that would like to ask a question? Quick comment.
Expecting Mr. Menard.
Yeah, I have comments, Mr. Chair.
Go right ahead, Mr. Menard.
All right, sorry I couldn't be there. I actually fell ill today, so I don't want to get anyone sick during what's already a challenging road ahead for us. You know, I fully expect the school committee to talk about the issues facing the school funding, and I echo everything that was said there, so I won't necessarily get into that. But by way of questions, you know, we have a fairly new governor, her first full budget really. I know she had her first last year, but promises and where she's putting effort. And it's in housing and climate and green energy, the MBTA communities. We heard in the Groton, session that we have like this, universal pre-K, free community college, infrastructure. And those all sound great, but to launch aggressive initiatives while we're in the financial situation that we're in today doesn't seem overly logical to me. So I'd like your opinion on all those. And I guess also, when you look at things like, environmental concerns and green energy, it makes no sense to take a town like Lunenburg, which has a lot of conservation land, which is also a contributor to, renewing the environment, to decarbonizing the environment. And you're also almost disincentivizing us to have forests by forcing us to do, housing, MBTA communities housings, et cetera. So I think you got to look at the problem a little bit differently in our region. Infrastructure, we have huge stormwater concerns that are going to affect our town. They are affecting our town. We need help on that. We can't afford to do that, on our own. Buildings, the cost of buildings through, the wage laws, those become very hard for a town like Lunenburg to deal with. So I guess I'd kind of like your thoughts on pumping the brakes on maybe some of these aggressive initiatives that, the administration has. You would need to fund them via the legislature in this environment that we're in, as well as giving more to the towns to kind of set their own destiny. Unfunded mandates, let's look at eliminating all these unfunded mandates and let Lunenburg be Lunenburg and let Groton be Groton, and let Chelsea and in Boston be there, Chelsea and Boston. So I think this one-size-fits-all approach to government that Beacon Hill likes to think about is a real problem beyond just maybe what the crisis we're feeling in this, which is certainly a crisis this year. So I guess the ask is, what's your take on some of these, aggressive legislative priorities?
Thank you. I'll take a hack.
Oh,
Yeah.
sure.
Thank you very much for the question. There's a lot there. I will start at just kind of the process because I think it informs what we're trying to do and what we are going to be able to accomplish, right? And everybody's got aspirational goals here. I don't think you belong in public service if you're not trying to do things that haven't been done and move your community forward. We have a constitutional requirement in the Commonwealth to balance our budget, right? The feds print money. The feds can write checks that they can't pay for. We can't do that in the state. So all of those aspirations, many of which you alluded to, need to happen or occur within the confines of a balanced budget. And we are in a difficult fiscal environment, as I stated before. But I'd like to pivot and talk a little bit about, at a higher level, what some of my regional priorities are. And I know they are the shared priorities of this delegation, because I think it speaks to how you grow responsibly in north central Massachusetts, and how you develop not just a commercial tax base, but create high-paying jobs which fuel our economy. And I would point to two things that I think are of paramount concern to me, and that as legislators, I know are a priority for this delegation. The first is housing, right? We are in a housing crisis in Massachusetts. I talked about this last year. To your point, we still have issues, but we have enacted legislation in the last 12 months that I am very proud of. And I would point you to two things. One is we expanded the low-income housing tax credit from $40 million to $60 million annually. And we also increased a program that I, as the chair of the Senate Chair of the Gateway City Caucus, working along Rep. Kushmarek and many of my colleagues that represent Gateway Cities, champion called the Housing Development Incentive Program. And that is a $2 million per project tax credit for developers to come into places like Fitchburg and Leominster, not Lunenburg, but Gateway Cities, and incent private housing development. So I think it is key for this region to do everything we can to spur private investment and to get people and developers building housing out there. And housing is an opportunity for kids who grow up here to come back here to raise their families. And we have a supply side problem. There's not enough inventory, and we need to build more. So everything else that we want to do about economic growth, smart growth, really is incumbent upon us taking on this housing challenge that we have in a systemic, deliberate, and strategic way. We're going to take up in the next 6 months in the legislature a housing bond bill that the governor proposed at $4.1 billion. That is going to be the most historic investment in supply-side solutions and to grow our housing stock in Massachusetts history. So those are things we've worked on, we're working on. Those are important for regional economic growth and our vitality. The second issue is workforce. We have a significant shortage in the trades. One of the things that myself and the representative worked on in our first year in office was a program called Innovation Pathways. And Innovation Pathways are comprehensive high schools that provide work-based learning experiences for juniors and seniors. They can be in the trades. At Fitchburg and Gardner High School, they're in advanced manufacturing, and they're created the local level partnerships between our public high schools and local industry to deliver the skilled workforce this region needs for our economy to work. And if you're talking about why the cost of the construction is so high, it's because we have a historically small labor force that is getting smaller and smaller. So the way to bring costs down is to get more skilled tradespeople into construction, into the building trades, building those 200,000 units of housing that we need across the state. But we should be desperate and competing for here in north central Massachusetts. And just before I pass it back, another initiative that we are working on that I believe we're going to make significant headway on this session is raising the housing cap at Devens. That's really important. There's an arbitrary cap that's been on for 30 years. And again, it's a whole of government approach to increase access to the trades, to grow our skilled workforce, to make sure that we are meeting the housing needs that we have and making sure that we're incenting people to come invest here in north central Massachusetts. That's how you grow our tax base. That's how you create high-paying jobs in the region. And I think that that is an answer to all of the budget strains that all of our communities are under right now.
Yeah, so I don't know if the others want to take a stab at it as well. I think a lot of what you talked about was actually Gardner and Fitchburg and Leominster and kind of city-type issues. But, here we stand, and I have to think like we're one of the districts in Hunger Games, right, where the big city planners, call us in when they need. But we're conservation. We have lakes and conservation land, et cetera. Building industry in that area, it's not going to happen. But by the same token, it's good recreation for the entire area. So, if Leominster can get the economic, boom because of the location and the size and the fact that they're a city, that's one thing. But what can you do for Lunenburg to kind of share the wealth on that? And then, I also mentioned, some of these things like universal pre-K and community college, free community college, which I think the superintendent's committee has wrote a paper against. Where did each of you stand on that specific bill?
So, I think as Senator Cronin just mentioned, and thank you for those thoughtful questions, Committee Member Maynard. The governor has aspirational priorities. And I think many in the legislature agree with those aspirations and setting a direction of where we'd like to get to. And I think on the other side, though, is the legislature realizing that we need to tackle the fiscal realities of the day and the present budget climate and fiscal environment that we're in. And so I think as we lay out maybe the long-term and midterm objectives of where we'd like to be, I think the legislature is very much focused on the needs here today and at present. And those are helping our municipalities meet budget shortfalls, transportation, education, particularly in K to 12. And so, I think everybody loves the idea of expanding childcare and making it, increasing access. We know we need it long-term to bolster our workforce and get parents back to work. Certainly as a new parent, that's something I've had to experience firsthand, both the inaffordability of childcare, but I'm fortunate enough to have access to childcare, which so many in the Commonwealth do not. And we have parents who work, six-figure jobs who are leaving industries because they can't find childcare, even if they could afford it. And that is seriously damaging our economy and our ability to grow right now, and we see that as one of the major hurdles. So yes, I think we all agree with that as a mid and long-term objective, but I think we also agree that we have budget priorities that need to be funded today. And so, I think as we look at really MBTA communities was mentioned, and I think part of that is really the smart growth plan, which is really a heart of some of the discussion and some of the shortfall that we find ourselves in today. We're talking about the 40R smart growth districts that were created, I believe this is back in 2004. And the idea here was to create zoning that made it easier for particularly rural and suburban communities to build more densely populated housing, realizing that we were looking at long-term projections and seeing that we're going to have a housing crisis on our hands in 20 years if we did nothing. The zoning was one of those things looking at tackling that long-term issue. And often, again, putting on my old municipal hat, when you look at more housing, as municipal officials, we often see dollar signs of, well, that means a whole lot more municipal services. Municipal services cost more. And so the idea of the 40R program is meant to incentivize more growth. We need to find a way to offset the costs to municipalities. And so 40S was created as not a way of incentivizing necessarily, but it was mitigating the prohibitive nature of similar programs like MBTA communities and smart growth. So the idea here was offsetting those. And for a long time, Lunenburg has been a beneficiary of the smart growth funds. And as tax valuations increased, excise tax valuations increased, and the 2023 apportionment of Chapter 70 increased for those specific students in the Tri-Town development, what we saw is, for the first time really ever, those dollars went away for smart growth. Now we're looking at projecting it next year. You can't budget it in because it's not in the cherry sheet, we realize, but we're already looking at, it's likely that in FY25, you see a return back to smart growth funding, because it looks back at about 18 months worth of data. And so what you're seeing reflected here is the addition of the Student Opportunity Act, the increase of more than $800,000 of revenue increase, largely because of those students living in that 40R district. Those 40S fundings were meant as the mitigating factor. It was the gap funding to make sure that you don't lose money, not necessarily to make sure that you have an ongoing revenue source. And it's tempting when you see that line item there. And so then we're seeing that funding went away for a year. It's certainly our priority to ensure that we're looking at those numbers, trying to get Lunenburg back there, and then making sure that that line item in funding is sustainable moving forward as well and fully funded in the state budget. That's something that I'm committed to, is making sure that smart growth funding is fully funded in its line item, so that when you return back to smart growth funding, that it's there for you. And I believe the number we got was Lunenburg missed it by $3,500. Now, if you'd gone the other way, you would have only gotten $3,500. And looking at the 3-year arc and trajectory on the funding, you went everywhere from, I think, $36,000 one year to $350,000, and everything in between throughout your history of getting it. And I think next year we'll move back towards probably what is the median or the mean average of that funding. Again, I know that doesn't help you for FY25 planning purposes, but there is some light at the end of the tunnel that you are not disqualified from this program moving forward. The funding is not going away so much as it is just trying to track predictability. And I know that's where we need to try to work with DESE and Department of Local Services to figure out how best to make that, one, more predictable for you, and two, so that you have more advance notice, because finding out the year after you've spent the funding that you no longer qualify for the program is not helpful. And so that's certainly something that we're trying to work with DESE and Department of Local Services and Department of Revenue to figure out what does that look like, and how is their hold harmless in some way on this program, or at least a minimum qualifying aid.
Yeah, I think the predictability of the entitlement funding, so-called entitlement funding and 40S funding makes it very difficult to budget. And you look at it year over year, it's all over the map on what increases or decreases we get. And I could go on for quite a while, but I will give my time back.
And you're absolutely right, though, it is a challenge. It depends on what the precise student enrollments in the Tri-Town development is year to year. And in some cases where those students go as well, changes what that formula looks like. And we realize that's a challenge.
Mr. Menard, I just want to jump in as well. I know you asked for us all to be on record, and I do feel like Senator Cronin and Rep. Kushmarek have really done a good job of unpacking sort of the situation that we are in, but I do want to offer up a couple of thoughts. I think both of them use the term aspirational, and that is how I see the new governor's budget as well. Looking at it, honestly, free pre-K and free community college. As a former teacher, and I don't even know if Rep. Kushmarek and Senator Cronin know this, I did tell this story when I was running for office, and it's probably a very small percentage of state reps who are in this boat, but I dropped out of high school at the end of my junior year to go to work and help my family make ends meet, and it's only because I was able to go back to school at night and get my general equivalency diploma later while I was working full-time, go back to college at night and earn my bachelor's degree, and then later more advanced schooling, that I am where I am today. So I consider education to be really transformational and fundamental to a person's life, and I think we need to invest in it. That being said, at the State House, there are words like financial winter. Like, we are in a very tough financial situation with revenue being off now for, I believe, 8 months straight. As I think Senator Cronin mentioned, all of our earmarks were cut by 50% in December because of the governor's 9C cuts. We're constitutionally required to present a balanced budget, and that was not going to happen without those cuts. So, communities that were counting on that money and that had projects that were going to be funded because of those earmarks had to either postpone those projects, because in the case of Dunstable, you can't buy half of a fire chief's car, or try to scramble to see if they could make ends meet. But to use the analogy that Mr. Beardmore said, her budget is at least a 100-legged stool. And at the end of the day, after it goes through the House and the Senate and the conference committee, it's going to be more like a 50-legged stool. Like, a lot of these things are going to have to fall by the wayside because there's just not the revenue to support that. And I think for the three of us, our focus is on what can we do to help Lunenburg. Maybe it's not pre-K and maybe it's not free community college. It sounds like the Chapter 70 funding is one of the places that we should look. And is there some mechanism to address the inflationary factor there? So the budget that we have right now is not the budget that we will get
Thank you.
Thank you, Evan. I want to turn to the select board for any comments or questions that the members of the select board may have. We don't necessarily have to go down the line, I know that that's my habit, but whatever order we want to.
If you may, Mr. Chair. I will forego the niceties. I thank you all for being here. I won't be profuse in that because that takes up time. So, I know all of you personally, and so I thank you for being our delegation. I just want to point out a few things, and then I do have a aspirational policy of my own. I want to thank all the comments that were made about things that are important to me, so I will mention some of them that were made. The Muni Choice Bill, thank you for refiling that. I still think it's an important bill. The Unitil rate case, I was there at the library when the Attorney General was there. I'd love to know, not tonight, but where that is. We talked about Chapter 70 funds from the school committee, and also was mentioned by the Finance Committee. We talked about 40S, Representative Kushmeri. These are all things that are important to us, and these are all things that, well, many of them, not all of them, but many of them have been topics during this very conversation yearly. And it is what I've been doing this for now 18 years, but other people don't stay in it as long, and they don't stay interested in it as long because it gets really tiring, and it gets frustrating, and it gets non-productive. And as I said at the Unitil rate hearing, I mean, that's what people have to fight against. I mean, we need to make sure that things aren't such bulwarks that they are unchangeable. No matter what people do and what people say, they don't change. Because if they don't change, eventually you will just get people to give up. And that's not going to be any more productive. It's just going to have a lot of people staying at home saying, why bother? And that's, that kind of apathy is what we need to work against. My one comment about the situation with the funding, if the funding is not a recession and we're only off by, if I remember, Senator Cronin, your comments about 0.4% of the collections, and we have $8 billion, I'm not saying supplant all of that funding, but, this could buffer in transit. It's meant to lessen the spikes. So that is something that some money could be used to be replenished if the outlook is, hey, we went through a flooding of funding and now we're facing the reduction of that, but it's going to come up again, then that would be a good use of rainy day funds and just vow to replenish it in the future just to lessen the blow. It may not get us to, get us whole, but it certainly, for many towns, especially if every town in their school department is facing this, it would be worth saying. So those are my initial comments. The aspirational one, as you all know, in our town, we had a tax issue over the past 12 months. And one of the things that came up in that, and this goes to housing a little bit too, and it goes to what people the things we just spoke about are frustrated with, and that is fairness and predictability. And how this goes to this aspirational goal was in the tax code is that, our residential property tax is based as a market value-based proposition. That's how it is. That's how we calculate it. And I think that really hurts people for long-term ownership because they get put in situations that if I bought a house 40 years ago and somebody next to me or around me buys a house for 5 times what I paid, that my taxes are going to go up because my valuation is now going to be the same as theirs. You force people to make decisions to have to leave because they can't afford the taxes. I think, and I would offer that I'd like to see the state look at what California has adopted in their Prop 13, which is a transactional-based value-based property tax, where when you buy your house, you're locked in that the most the assessment can go up in any year. The assessed value is 2% forever, as long as you live there, and I would say as long as it's your primary residence. I don't know if these are the rules for them, but as long as it's your primary residence and you continue ownership there and you live there as your primary residence as opposed to an investment property, that's the most your assessed value can go. And therefore, your assessed value, your taxes will be based on your assessed value, will stay in a predictable range that you can plan for your future. The only time that gets raised is when it changes hands. So when it's sold from one property owner to another, that assessed value would go up to the actual market value that somebody pays for it, and therefore would get reallotted that way. I think that is one of the most fair things and the most predictable for homeowners, especially people who look and say, I want to live here for 50 years. You know, if you're at a point where you're 60, 70, 80 years old on a fixed income, and all of a sudden you're looking at your assessment go up 135%, and your tax bill go up 80%, and you're like, you know, now it's not a choice, I'm forced to, we have people forced to move and to sell their homes. I would urge you to take this back to the state legislature, to look at a model like that. That has been enacted since 1978. There were obviously some hiccups at the beginning, but they have enacted it and worked with it since then. And I think it is a model that we should look to at least base something off of, if not adopt it directly. And I think it makes all the sense in the world to do that. People who pay high prices for houses should expect to pay higher prices for taxes. And when you live someplace a long time, eventually, you should be able to predict what your income is going to be, and therefore what your tax bill is going to be to something regular. So these are the things, that's my aspirational goal for you to bring back to the State House. And again, thank you for coming to me.
Thank you, Selectman Alonso. I have a lot of comments, but
I don't want to take up a bunch of time because I think the biggest issue has been identified and addressed. But I do want to just thank you, since you're all here now, thank you, take the opportunity to thank you for what you have done to move the means-tested senior tax relief through, and I'm glad that's progressing. So that's been a very important issue to me personally, not to me personally, but it's one that I've advocated for, so thank you.
Could I just respond to Selectman Alonso? I really appreciate your comments. Myself and Representative Scarsdale were in Groton last week for a meeting where a lot of the themes are the same. And the stress to both the taxpayer and the town budget because of the Prop 2.5 regime is something that is coming up in all the towns that we represent, especially because we are in an inflationary environment. Some of the feedback that we gave and the dialogue that we had is, it is helpful for us as policymakers if town administrators and town managers or select board members or city councilors can find consensus around issues or remedies. And I don't know if moving forward the right organization would be the MMA to vet that and flush that out, but ways to study and find consensus around remedies around Prop 2.5 or the California model, I think is very helpful for us to build energy and momentum around solutions. So that's one point, and the second point is, I just want to touch base on Unitil. I was very happy that we were able to work together to get the Attorney General out to Lunenburg. I don't remember an Attorney General being out here. I think maybe during the ice storm in 2008. No, I don't have any recollection. So, it is our top priority with her. One thing that I found very encouraging about that is she didn't just show up with her communications team. She brought all her policy people out. And as the Representative Kushmarek said, there were 11 people who work full-time for the Attorney General's office out here in Lunenburg listening to constituents. And that is not our last interface with that group. We met with them as a delegation last week, and I think one of the things that we take seriously is we don't want to talk about solutions, we want to pursue them and partner with people in the Attorney General's office at the local level to try to move the ball forward on this issue. And I know it's the most frustrating issue, and it hurts our competitiveness so much in north central Massachusetts. And we have gone to the Attorney General and the people who just worked these rate cases, and we asked them, can you help us determine an innovative solution or a new angle to come at this? What they came back to us with last week was the idea of permitting energy suppliers to aggregate their supply purchasing power, right? So instead of Unitil going out on the market and purchasing power at a higher rate than Eversource or National Grid, could the legislature allow them to aggregate those costs and join National Grid or join Eversource to purchase for both their service areas? So that is a bill that we are working on as a delegation, and as soon as we get fine-tuned, we plan to file. But it is a type of innovative solution, I believe, illustrates that we are committed to actually making progress on this issue. You know, I pay Unitil bills, Mike pays Unitil bills, we get it, and we are not happy with where we are. We understand what a burden it is to working families. And so we're going to continue to work with partners at all levels of government, but I appreciate your engagement on the issue, and you haven't heard the last from us on it.
I want to comment on several things. So first, I want to thank the delegation. You guys know, but I'll say it to those at home, I feel like constant communication with you guys on a variety of issues. But I want to put some credit where credit's due. You know, when conversation came up about Leominster Hospital losing the birthing center, I want to acknowledge that you guys were right there. You know, as our delegation, understanding the impact to our residents, without your help, we would not be at this pause that we're at now, in which the whole thing is being reassessed. You know, that really was, I think, led by the delegation in many ways. So I first want to just acknowledge that, you know, losing the opportunity for the mothers and women in this region to have the opportunity to give birth in Leominster, and it being 40, you know, minutes, 35 minutes away in Gardner or Worcester or Concord, you know, huge loss to our community. So again, I want to just give some credit where credit's due. I also want to acknowledge, you know, Representative Scarsdale. You know, I think we understand that when you come into the State House, you learn pretty quickly it's a very seniority-based system. And so I know that as a junior, as a freshman legislator, you know, you really have jumped into unifying the region and understanding that the concerns that you're seeing in your district are pretty universal concerns. But the hardship that we have is that, you know, we have a lot of voices within the communities, but, you know, we have one representative, in our case two representatives, but you compare that to a city like Worcester and we're easily drowned out. And so it becomes really important for us to come together as a region, as a community, that when you look at the square footage of how much space we take up here in North Central Mass, you know, having this kind of regional focus on how we can resolve and address these economic challenges. I know that we've talked about hiring a grant writer, we've talked about the universal website. All those things are to our benefit. I want to acknowledge that. I also want to acknowledge Mike and John, Senator Cronin, and Representative Krustameric, Innovation Pathways. Something I've been saying, I think the first time you met with me, is there has to be a way, a better way to connect people into jobs. You know, high school is great, and I think a lot of the educational focus has really gone to preparing kids for college, but there's a lot of kids who aren't going to college. And how do they find meaning and value in the workforce? It would be great. I fully support the Innovation Pathways program. I want to comment while the school committee is here. I hope the school committee will join Senator Cronin in joining the movement to trade school lotteries. It doesn't make any sense for WPI to have their #1 feeder school being Monty Tech. That doesn't make any sense. You know, kids going to Monty Tech are getting into college, and Monty Tech gets to pick the best and the brightest, so to speak. It would be great if we can go to a lottery system that gives a fair opportunity from kids from a variety of backgrounds to go into the trades. I work in real estate, I work in construction. There is an enormous shortage, and there are inadequate opportunities to get there. So again, you know, I did note, Senator Cronin, that you are moving to try to help us get to the point where all of the tech schools are lottery based. I wholeheartedly support that, and I think that that's going to be in the better needs of all the kids that we have. But I want to address a couple things that are pressing to me. Number one, these aren't in any particular order, but the first thing, prevailing wage, okay? Everybody knows that prevailing wage is only prevailing for governments. They're not prevailing for anybody else. Anyone who's gotten, you know, there was a report that came out in the New York Times that identified that something along the lines of 90-something% of roofers are from Central America. Anyone who's had a roof done at their house for the most part, they have not been hiring an American if they have been hiring an American company, the people doing the work are speaking Spanish, okay? Nothing's wrong with that. Nothing's wrong with people speaking Spanish. I promise you that person is not making prevailing wage. And so when the average person can get work done at their house far, far cheaper than a town or any municipality can, it becomes a burden for us. You know, we know that when we work with, I work, as you know, for mass development, when we're working with developers, they know that if they own the property, their costs are going to come down by 1/3 to 1/2, which means that we're getting a 30 to 50% markup on anything we need construction. So I do think prevailing wage needs to be looked at. I mentioned the trade school lotteries. You know, you are working through innovation pathways on having those pipelines, which I do encourage. Pipelines for government jobs. If you are a city kid growing up in Fitchburg, growing up in Leominster, you don't have a town manager. So how do you know what that job is? How do you ever get exposure to what that role is? And if you go to college, what's the program that's going to guide you there? Now, yes, there might be one on the master's level. What about when you first start college? What about assessors? How do we get a better pool of assessors? Municipal finance people. I mean, these are critical jobs that every municipality needs. And looking at schools, we have all these state schools. There's no pathway to get there. So, you know, we're left in this position as a community where we've been struggling to fill critical roles because there's just not enough people. I think when we were first going into this, there was something like 13 vacancies for assessors in the Commonwealth. I mean, that's craziness. I mean, it took us almost a year to hire someone to replace Karen as our town accountant and financial director. So I urge there to be more focus on looking at college, creating those pathways to some of these government jobs that we all depend upon. And, you know, and then broadly speaking, when it comes to education, you know, I'm of the opinion that your zip code should not determine how good the quality of education is. Period. It just shouldn't. You know, while we live in Lunenburg, we're here to advocate for our fellow residents, right? But education, I mean, I'm not blind. I'm not blind to the fact that the demographic of Lunenburg is different than the demographic of Fitchburg, right? It's different than the demographic in Fall River when I go down there, which is different than the demographic in Holyoke. You know, if you live in Massachusetts, you are, in my view, you're entitled to the same education no matter where you live. But here are some challenges that we have. When the state says you have a right to education, and no matter what special needs you have, that it will be funded and taken care of, the state needs to back that up with some dollars. You know, when you have one child that needs $150,000 of services, it takes 23 households in our town to pay for that. 23 households, where all that their tax dollars are going to are support the needs of one child. I'm not saying it shouldn't happen. What I'm saying is we can't manage our money and keep things balanced when it takes 23 households to provide the needs of one child. Because we have senior populations, we have other needs. It would be great if there could be, I heard everything you said about the tight budgetary situation, but this to me is an unfunded mandate. It's something that we all support, we all agree with. Yes, the town needs to fork over some money, but when we look at the school budget right now, when we see some of this growth, a lot, not all of it, but a decent amount of this is coming from out-of-district placements. Right, out-of-district placements that we are mandated to comply with, but we don't get additional dollars to help support. So, you know, I know that's added to your list. And then something was noted today about childcare not being accessible. You know, 30-something years ago, my aunt ran a program out of her basement, running childcare. I mean, the requirements to have a kid are basically be a human being, right? And so it became for the community an opportunity for kids to go there during the day. And we're talking 2-year-olds, 3-year-olds, 4-year-olds. When the state came in with the college degree requirement, what you've done is you've jacked up the price of how much childcare costs to provide a service that not everyone needs. Sometimes people just need a babysitter. And yes, maybe there should be a course that everyone has to take in order to provide the service that you can give your kids or the young kids these critical, you know, learning skills along the way. Right? But why do you need a college degree? And again, if that requirement was changed, maybe the owner needs a degree. Not everyone who works there does. But if there was a training program, we can see the cost of this come way down. I have friends who have you know, young kids, $2,400 a month in childcare. I mean, people are quitting their jobs. And why does it cost so much? Because the person who has the college degree wants to make a livable wage, which is normal. But if we were able to capture more of the 18, 19, 20-year-olds, who might have the day off or might not be in class for that day, be able to get them to come in and do this. We have substitute teachers in many communities that don't have the same requirements as you do to provide childhood education, for kids 1 through, or birth through 5. So I encourage that to be relooked at, and then that will help us as well. So those are my main things. Again, I think that the work overall that we're doing is moving us in the right direction. I'm really satisfied with the delegation that we have. I know that you guys are all working hard for our community. And again, thank you all for being here today.
Mr. Chairman, thanks for sharing those priorities, and I know you and I have talked about some of these, most of these really at length, and I know that we'll continue to. Just 2 items that you spoke to that I want to address specifically. The first, the out-of-district placement. And I know school committee member Beardmore mentioned it earlier, circuit breaker and, don't work around the margins. And I get that. I totally understand and sympathize with, yes, we need the systems fix, but also while we work on the systems fix, we need the margins fixes that, often it's the things that break on the margin that break the total budget. And often in this case, I think we can point to that. You just pointed to 23 households worth of taxes that have to be focused and earmarked directly to address out-of-district placement. So I have 4 different bills that get at the various components of how that would, of how that impacts municipal budgets, and really looking to solve and take, maybe put 19 of those households back on looking at the unrestricted costs or the other Chapter 70 costs, and really trying to move more of that burden onto the state, because I hear you, and those costs aren't going away, and I would argue that they're becoming a whole lot larger of a margin as we look ahead. Just last year, we saw a 16% increase, and so, I worked with my colleagues in the legislature, but I was the lead in working with the Mass Association of Superintendents to get a pothole account. This is really a reserve account for communities like Lunenburg, who are seeing more than 16% increases in those out-of-district costs, and to work to ensure that those funds are available. It's not going to go to benefit Fitchburg, so it was one of those, let's get at the communities that need it the most. And that was, and I apologize, we're about 9 months removed from it. It was in excess of $70 million set aside to rural and suburban communities specifically to target this. That was a one-time account in the current fiscal year budget that we're operating in to help reimburse you. So hopefully that will, as you look for reimbursement at the end of the year, as we go into next year, that'll be there to help you, hopefully with some gap and some bridge funding. But a lot of the legislation that I filed is really looking at not just the one-time fix, but how do we look at this in a perpetual, sustainable, and budgetable fashion for you moving forward, because these costs are not going away. And those children and those parents and those families are entitled to get the type of care and education that their children need, and we should never deprive them of that opportunity. But again, on the other hand, we shouldn't be depriving our districts and our schools of the funding that's needed either. And so it shouldn't be one at the expense of the other, and that's firmly where I believe the state can step up and really help mitigate some of the impact and the pain that that small communities like Lunenburg are experiencing. Cities have greater budgetary flexibility, and when 1 or 2 students with a price tag of $120,000 a year move in or out of the district, they can usually cover that. Towns like Lunenburg do not have that flexibility, and you know that far too well. So we hear you loud and clear. We filed that legislation. We're having meaningful and productive conversations with our Superintendents Association and School Committees Association, and we got the first year worth of funding done right after we filed it. So I think that gives some hope as we move forward. The second piece on the child care, I won't speak to the degree requirement specifically, though I understand and hear what you're saying, and I think there probably is more room for flexibility, as you allude to. But Representative Higgins from Leominster and I are working, and we just finished crafting this bill, but it would allow a by right childcare, and any apartments or business. And right now, what we're seeing is restrictive zoning, both from the state as well as municipalities, that's impacting the availability of daycare statewide. And it's not restricted to just a zip code. So, you know, it might not be restrictive in Lunenburg, but it could be restrictive in the next zip code over, which then impacts your families are then fighting for fewer slots, right? So you have to kind of look at it in the context in the same way that Senator Crone was talking about housing in Fitchburg and Lunenburg. That helps Lunenburg, right? That helps ease the demand. It's just the market economics. So we have to look kind of holistically and regionally about how we tackle some of these. But we're looking at, particularly for cities, that would start to target some of that by right childcare centers under a certain threshold. So like half a dozen or up to 10. And really looking at, all right, how would that start to change the availability? Because often it's renters who aren't able to do it. Renters are most able in that industry just based on the pay. And the credentialing requirements, as you allude to, have higher costs. Often they can't afford to open up their own business in a properly zoned area and then go jump through all the hoops. For them, it's just not fiscally feasible. And it doesn't make sense for them to do. But often, if given the opportunity to launch a small business of to have 6 kids to provide for with just themselves and maybe one other employee, not only does that start to make the systems work and the margins work, it allows them the opportunity to start acquiring and accumulating wealth that then allow them to launch either a bigger business or just improve their own means while also providing greater availability. So I think there's a lot of things. You know, the governor has the big, bold vision, yes. I appreciate that, and I agree with it as an aspiration, but I think there's, 24 small but meaningful changes that we can start making, whether it's the credentialing or the availability of the zoning, that can really have meaningful impacts today and save our communities and our families money as well.
All right. I want to provide Evan and Carol with another opportunity before we close. I want to try to wrap up in the next couple minutes or so.
I'm going to waive that to Mr. Schoenbrini, one of our school committee members who had a question that was brought up during the evening.
I'm going to do the same thing Peter did. Thank you, everybody, for coming tonight. I have a specific issue. Roughly 3.7% of the school budget is dedicated to our providing transportation. We have a $23 million budget, about $870,000, Dr. Burnham still correct, is dedicated towards paying for de-busing. When we had a budget busing issue previously, we, as we always did, looked for a cheaper alternative, tried to put out bids. We received one bid. It was from de-busing. When market forces do not work to provide competitive bids for town services, state government needs to step in. This is something that will cost the state of Massachusetts no money, and it will be something that offers some relief to towns like Lunenburg. Having an obligation to place more than one bid as a transportation company would solve a lot of problems. Even if it does not generate actual competitive bidding, the act of having multiple bids, maybe somebody makes a mistake and it actually is cheaper to hire a company out of North Adams, Massachusetts, or I don't know. But having no competitive options over and over again, year after year, means that we are forced to pay whatever they ask for. If it was a small amount of money, that would be one thing. But like I said, this is about 3.7% of the budget. Is there a legislative fix to this problem? That's my question. I'll sit down so we can talk.
And that's a great question, and one that I think every school district in north central Massachusetts is faced with that same issue, and certainly we used to talk about that ad nauseum in Fitchburg. Was there's one transportation company, and they can pretty much charge whatever they want. I'll be honest, I haven't seen a legislative solution proposed, but I'd be happy to work with you. Because, I mean, it's just criminal what we're seeing as the increases year over year. And so if there's a regulatory way, and I know we all get scared when we start, but if there's a regulatory way that we can index it, index it appropriately for companies that can't have a competitive bid, perhaps. I think there's ways that we can look at this to help mitigate some of those increases that you're seeing year over year. I'm happy to explore creative ways that we can find, because I just don't see those costs coming down anytime soon, and I don't see the competition flourishing anytime soon either, because the startup costs are just so prohibitive for somebody looking to enter into the busing space. So, Madam Chair, you spoke with me, I want to give you your due credit, you spoke with me about this a couple of weeks ago as well, about struggling with this exact number and issues, so I would love to work with you and your members.
Yeah, I just want to add, Madam Chair, I think that those were your parting words when you left my office hours in Groton. And, you know, anytime you have a business that has a monopoly, it's not too hard to see what happens. And I remember, I think it was 2019, our superintendent had come to the select board to talk about the latest quote from D-Bus, and like, you have to go back to them, and he did, and he came back to relay what happened. He said, this isn't acceptable, you know, work on the numbers, and they're like, you're right, and they slid the paper back across, and it was up another 0.5%, because where are you gonna go? There's no place to go in this whole region. It's all D-Bus company. So likewise, because it's such a big issue for my town, I'm happy to partner with Rep. Kuchmarek and you and others to see what we can do about that.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for attending this evening. And Ms. Archambault, Mr. Beerbohr, you must both have better email addresses than I do, because I have not received any response, basically. I am here from a perspective of disappointment. I feel that this could have been time better spent. I think this was meant to be a chance for the town of Lunenburg to express to you what our legislative needs are. And I think we did accomplish that to a small extent. I think there was a large amount of, here's what we're doing for the entire area, the entire region, and that's wonderful. But as has been mentioned a number of times, we're not the entire region. We're not a gateway city. We're not on the New Hampshire border. We're Lunenburg. We're a small town. Yet we are treated by the budgetary calculations as if we were, as Mr. Beerbohr said, a very lucrative town. We have plenty of money to spend, but we don't actually have that. I think that given the number of issues that we're all facing in this town right now, having everyone speak together at the same meeting is not constructive. Drilling down into the details that need to actually be discussed can't happen in 20 minutes. It can't happen in 90 minutes, especially across 3 different committees and boards. I agree that it certainly is necessary to have the executive in contact with our delegates. But at the same time, the legislative should have a chance to speak to the legislative branch of government. I have 10 questions, 12 questions that I didn't even bring up. We have 7 members in our committee. We heard from 1. I have people that were not allowed to speak because there wasn't enough time. And that disappoints me, because that means that we're not actually getting to the meat of the issues that we really need to discuss. We're talking about all this high-level stuff. We're talking about, oh, we're doing these things over here in the margins, and oh, this is too big of a thing to tackle right now. But that doesn't help us. That just says, okay, here we are for FY25. Let's talk about for FY26. We have to get in line in October. So what I would like to see happen, honestly, is to go down the list. Senator Cronin, you represent 10 towns. Rep. Kuchmarek, you have 2 towns. Rep. Scarsdale, you have 6 towns. We're one of those towns. I would think that there should be time in a schedule across 365 days to plan out a meeting, to meet with the school committee for 90 minutes and say, hey, look, let's talk about school-related stuff. It's 56% of our budget. We should probably give them some time to talk to you. We should say, hey, here's the executive side. Let's talk about our Chapter 9 funds and our 40H funds and whatnot. Let's have them give you a full 90 minutes to really get into those minutiae. And then let's come back and say, hey, let's talk to the Finance Committee as well and say, hey, this is what the town is kind of pushing for. This is where the kind of general consensus is between the two, and maybe we have some ideas as well. So I very much look forward to hearing back from the emails. Senator Cronin, I did get a response from your director with your cell phone number. that doesn't help the finance committee.
So I'd like the opportunity to respond to that. We've been asked by members of the select board to not appear at and I don't want to speak for all the members of the select board, but we've been asked as a delegation not to appear before any other committee except the executive committee. And so we respect that. And you have my personal cell phone. I will give you 90 minutes any day of the year, anytime, to discuss anything that you would like, as it pertains to Lunenburg. So, and Carol called me last week. We were in touch right away, and we had a substantive discussion that was at a granular level. And so I want to push back on the idea that we are not available or that we're not willing to engage substantively on the issues that are before the finance committee or the school committee, because you can get in touch with me personally at any time.
I'll just dovetail. Our first year in office, we met with both, and we walked away with competing and conflicting priorities of two different sets of priorities and lists that then left us wondering, all right, so what is the earmark priority? What's the legislative priority? And so I'm always happy and available to talk one-on-one, as I do with members of the school committee and the select board. I want to continue to do exactly that. But aggregating into kind of one list of priorities and making sure that we have an opportunity where we're all on the same page and in one room and being able to discuss and disagree if there are competing priorities. I found today particularly helpful in getting at where some of the aggregate issues are. But I think we want to continue to engage in these discussions and make sure that everybody's around the table when we're doing it.
To push back against that, there was no chance to have a discourse. There was only option to say, here's our priority list, here's our priority list, here's our priority list, here's your priority list, okay, let's go home. So there wasn't that opportunity for the kind of back and forth to say, oh, I disagree with, not throwing the bus, but Selectman Alonso's California proposition. I think it's a great idea, but perhaps I don't have that opportunity to say, he's out of his mind.
Then perhaps what we need to do going forward is, prior to meeting with the delegation, perhaps it would be wise for us to have a three-way joint meeting to work through some of these things. I think that we need to be mindful to speak with one voice. I think it's important as a community for us to speak with one voice. And a lot of, the priorities, we do funnel them through the executive board that comes in from different boards and committees. We prioritize them, and we try to provide our delegation with the priorities of the town through the executive, so that way they can have concrete things to work on. I mean, I do hear and I do understand that sometimes it can be, working through conversations is one thing, but I think identifying priorities is another. And I think that, when engaging with different boards and committees, especially during this time of the year where we want to provide some kind of legislative framework, which will be coming after this meeting. Usually it's going to be first meeting or two in March. I do hear you, Evan. I think that we probably should just approach it internally different in the future. I want to turn to the town manager for any final comments from the town manager.
Thank you. Thank you to the delegation for coming tonight and listening to everyone speak and hearing about our budget priorities and legislative priorities. The list I put together, a number have already been referenced, including Chapter 70, Chapter 90, the funding formula for that, permanently changing that to the apportionment with the fair share funding. Also, to create a municipal building assistance authority, which has been discussed, and that is near and dear to Lunenburg, as we are facing for many decades a surplus of buildings that are expensive to renovate or reuse. For certain measures that are just efficiency and cost-saving measures, not really funding related particularly, to increase estate procurement thresholds, to reduce administrative cost burdens, and to match the procurement thresholds under Chapter 30B as they are for schools, to address prevailing wage laws, to provide exemptions and rural factors that would allow towns to complete necessary projects as prevailing wage requirements at least 30% to the cost of projects, create a municipal pathways program to address continued trend of increasing retired municipal employees and a decline in qualified pool of applicants, and to work with administration, your administration, the state and various agencies that would allow administrative costs to be eligible for all grants. There are certain grant programs such as Green Communities, which we are able to put in administrative costs related to that grant, which helps towns that don't have sufficient staff to help with that, those costs and work related to this.
All right.
Mr. Chair, I'm so sorry to interrupt you. Can I just make two quick comments? I don't know if everyone knows, but I was sworn in late in 2023. I came in sworn in at 11 o'clock on January 18th. That was a Wednesday. I got my computer, my State House computer, the next day, the 19th, around 10 or 11, and at 5 o'clock on Friday, so 2.5 days, but only like a little over 1 day since I got my computer, was the deadline to file bills. So I managed to get 9 bills filed. One of them was the Massachusetts School Building, the Building Authority, Building Authority bill. I am sad to report that that was sent to study, but I will be circling back to the chair to find out what were the weaknesses in it, and happy to refile that again next year before the filing deadline. And to Chair Waters, I do want to say, it's been said many times, we work as a team. I think we're a very strong and committed delegation. Sometimes when we all get the same email, one office takes the lead on returning. If that was not the case for this email, I want to publicly apologize for not getting back to you. I try very hard to answer every single email that comes, to my desk, and I apologize. I will go back and look for that email.
All right, I know that I'd calculated about 13 to 15 minutes of potential spillage, overage. We're at 20, so I do want to invite any final comments from the Select Board. Selectman Imke, I don't know if you wanted to make any final comments. I don't know if Selectman Nuzolo joined in with us this evening. And then I want to invite the chairs to adjourn their meeting.
I'll just say thank you for coming and giving us the time this evening. Being on the board for less than a year, this is, I'm trying to take it all in. I did go back and watch last year's recording of this when you came last March, I believe. And I agree with Mrs. Brzezowski. There's a lot of, common threads, things that are still carrying over. So hopefully, a year from now, some of these will be addressed and things will, it'll be a happier message. And I'll look forward to that.
Well, again, I want to thank all of you thank the delegation for being here. I know this is time out of your evening. I know we all work all day and then you come here and join with us this evening, but again, I want to appreciate the comments, appreciate the work, and again, thank you all for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I would take a motion from a school committee member to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn?
A second? All those in favor? Aye.
I would take a motion to adjourn the Finance Committee meeting. First, to adjourn. Is there a second? All right, roll call vote. Mr. Menard.
No, I think we still have 7 minutes. We need to make this done. I think it's inappropriate for one member of the selectmen to say that they're not allowed to meet with us. And to them to then say that they're going to listen only to the select board in that. So I say no, let's go. We have a lot of problems to talk about.
You want to move on, Evan, to your next member, please? Keep voting.
Mr. Passios. Is Ms. Russell still on the call? I don't see her. No. Mr. Simeoni? Aye. Mr. Gray? Aye. And an aye from myself. We are adjourned.
Thank you both. On this board, we're just going to take a 2-minute recess so we can readjust the table here.
Yes,
What do you say?
I misspoke.
Hi, I'm John Cronin. I talked to your assistant. Hey, John. Cronin. Listen, I just wanted to say, do you need Buster to comment? Does he know he's in Massachusetts?
All right, Select Board is now going to resume its meeting.
You only live once.
I will ask all extra conversations, if you wouldn't mind taking them downstairs. All right. So we should get through the rest of this a little quickly. All right. So I know we pushed public comments back. We're going to go to public comments. Any public comments this evening from the board? Any public comments from the board?
None from me.
Seeing none, any, oh. Yep, yes.
Okay. All right, first, I'm going to make a public comment on behalf of the Adult Activity Center. This might be, it's not for the COA, it's for the Adult Activity Center in general, so I'm not putting it under committee reports. I just wanted to just make people aware or remind people that there are many activities during the course of a month that go on at the Adult Activity Center. They are, just for example, this past Friday, there was a very engaging discussion on the history of Town Hall and the Town Clock given by Bill Tyler and Lou Franco.
Lou who?
So, that you can watch that one on replay. But just for example, coming up, the 22nd, we're not past the 22nd yet, right? No. There's a craft class, decorative tiled mirror. This one's filled up, but there's B. Adams will be speaking on growing up in Hitler's backyard. I went to her talk about 17 years ago. It was absolutely jaw-dropping. Unfortunately, it's filled up, but it just gives you an idea of what's there. There is, on the 29th, Happiness at Any Age. On the 7th, Magic with Eddie Raymond. So there's a magic. St. Patrick's Luncheon and Entertainment on the 15th. Line dancing on the 20th. This one I really want to flag. On the 25th, Lunenburg Assessors Program, How Can We Help? So the assessors will be appearing, maybe well, at least one of them, but I think two or more, and discussing sort of engaging with the assessor's office and, understanding your taxes and all. So, and then on the 28th, I might attend this one myself, Therapy Gardens Program, Cannabis and You. So that is on behalf of Adult Activity Center. Thank you. Turning and shifting gears, I want to make a statement tonight, and I want to begin by reminding people that we have a town election coming up on May 18th. Among other positions, we know that at least one current member of the Board of Assessors, who was appointed on an interim basis, does not plan to run for a new term. Accordingly, I'm putting out another call for members of the public to consider running in that election. Beyond the assessor's seat, the select board seat that I currently occupy is subject to election. But this is not a campaign message, which would be totally inappropriate. Rather, I am announcing my decision not to run for a second term. This was not an easy decision. I vacillated for about 4 months starting in early summer before reaching a firm decision around October. Many factors went into this decision. Service is all about giving, capacity, constant output of one's time and energy. In the end, this decision was driven by capacity. As humans, each of us has a finite amount of time and energy. I'm simply spread too thinly, and I need to shuffle the deck and reprioritize where I am dedicating my energy and time, particularly with respect to my law practice. I have enjoyed my work on this board. It has been difficult at times, but overall it has been rewarding. Like all who selflessly volunteer their time to serve town government, I came into this job with a set of objectives. My number one objective was to set in motion legislation under our Home Rule Charter for senior tax relief. I kept a laser focus on that objective and told myself and others that if I were integral to getting even just that one thing done, then my term will have been a success. While we got that and other things done, for that one thing, I do consider my term a success. And I want to acknowledge and thank Mr. Alonso, with whom I partnered to write the warrant article that ultimately allowed this measure to move forward on Beacon Hill. Beyond that, and more generally, I want to say to each member of this board, as presently constituted, and as constituted over my entire term, I did serve with 8 different members of this board over 3 years, as well as the town manager. It has been my honor to serve with you. I regard each of you as a person of goodwill and character, and despite, or maybe even because of, some rough road along the way, I am better than I was 3 years ago. To the people of Lunenburg, thank you for entrusting me with one of just 5 seats on this board. It has been my privilege, and more frequently than not, my pleasure, to serve in this capacity. But tonight is not the end. My focus and heart are not diminished by my announcement. On the contrary, there is in me a heightened sense of urgency to advance what we can advance and solve what we can solve together over the next 88 days. I have announced my plans tonight so that people know that there is a clean slate relative to this select board seat. This will allow people thinking of serving to know the landscape well in advance of the caucus in March, which I learned this evening is March 25th. They'll know that the incumbent is not running and can weigh their decisions accordingly. I encourage people to step up and run for this seat and for other seats in town. As I've stated frequently, I believe that every seat at every level should be contested every time, and I would say that even if I were running. Thank you.
Thank you, Lou. Thank you, Lou. Do we have any other public comments from the board or town manager? No? Seeing none, do we have any public comments this evening from the public?
Very long, arduous hour. I think was very informative.
Please be sure to state your name.
Oh, I'm sorry. My name's John Bowen, 162 Highland Street, Lunenburg, Mass. I just wanted to thank the chair and thank the board, as I always do, for allowing me my 3 minutes. I just want to make some comments here and I will try to stay within my 3 minutes, and I appreciate any extra time if I'm needed. Cemetery Commission meeting agenda has come out. I noticed that there is a donation, which I believe is a premature donation, but then again, I'm not saying that a donation can't be received. However, for what the donation is being applied to, has not had a full DPW construction investigation. So this is collecting money without having all the funding or money that is necessary to be able to procure a project. The rustic wall presentation was not complete and thorough construction design bill. The presentation was not done by a qualified construction planner. It didn't take into a number of different situations. About his property value assessment, that was not taken into consideration. Sound and noise study, that also wasn't taken into consideration. The trees act as a sound barrier for the abutters who may have noise on the property, as well as those whose families are interred for privacy from any noise from outside the cemetery. Having something 3 feet is not going to stop that noise. There are sound laws in town. The sound laws have to be abided by. I think it's 60, 80 decibels beyond the boundary line. And that means that somebody would have to do that study before you could ask for money. This is what a construction planner would do. The quiet enjoyment for both ways, for the abutters and for those families of the interred, would have to be enjoined in that construction plan. If abutters have guests on their private gathering, how will the noise affect that and the families themselves? The quiet enjoyment and vice versa, the same situation also we have had in this town, further up Holman Street, if you remember, about noise. The patronage bench and foundation that was engraved and paid for, the foundation and the engraver was paid for by the Cemetery Commission. It was signed and authorized by the town manager. That is appalling. That is a conflict of interest violation. The request for capital plan money to fix foundation stones and wash should come from the Cemetery Commission budget. I mean the town manager, because she writes and authorizes the spending. After all, if town manager can authorize engraving and a foundation as a patronage gift with the cemetery commission for a donor or a family or for a sitting official in this town, she can pay for everyone else's. And we call that equal protection under our Constitution. These are conflict of interest violations. Again, the select board should be looking into these, including the plethora of other issues that I have raised with regard to open meeting law violations, ethics violations, as well as conflict of interest. I have also raised other issues and have requested executive session here and have been ignored. I have requested this executive session so that people who are elected officials in this town and otherwise would not be confronted in a public comment. Mr. Jeffries, thank you. You have agreed to meet with me this week. We plan to have that meeting. I appreciate that. The issues that I presented need to be heard by the entire board. This is something that is a town problem that needs to be handled in an executive session. It has to do with employees in town. It has to do with elected officials in town. This isn't something you put out in the public, which the Cemetery Commission thought that was best to do when I recommended before she brought anything public to keep this in executive session. I have questioned the actions of these elected town appointed officials and elected officials as well. The Cemetery Commission has never approached me at any point in time about anything regarding my property or regarding any issues or situations, circumstances with the cemetery. But they want to make reports. They act unbecoming as elected persons. They claim they are working for the community, but am I not the community? Evidently not, because I can show in statements made by the commission, by Mr. Jeffries himself and the town manager, in emails where they have characterized my person in a negative light. The Cemetery Commission holds no power. I will say this again, it is redundant and duplicitous, and its exercise, which it clearly says in Mass General Laws, Chapter 114, that the Select Board will be the commission unless the town elects a commission, which election of a commission, okay, would usually only be if the town had a cemetery corporation, which would be handled by 5 members in a directorship, to be able to organize any kind of fundraising or anything else like that for the commission, which is not being discussed in this town, which would be better because it would contain 5 directors and not 2 people making decisions when there's supposed to be 3, and because we can't fulfill the appointed position, that means that we have 2, and one of those votes is a rubber stamp. Just watch the meetings. I just want to thank the Select Board for allowing me the time to just put forward that public comment, and I must say it again and stress it again. I think this is a place for executive session, not here before the people right now, until a decision is made, an executive decision of the behavior of some of the people in this town. I appreciate time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bowen. You've made a couple public comments, and so I just want to clarify one thing. Your request to meet in executive session was not ignored, it was denied. That was not something I was willing to put on the agenda. So this board, and I will speak broadly, this board must meet in a public session every time a quorum of us meet. It is a public meeting. The law outlines certain requirements in which we can go into executive session, and the request did not satisfy any of those requirements. Secondly, I just want to note that this board does not remove other elected officials. The process to do that is outlined in the charter. Elected officials are our peers, and again, we don't remove other elected officials. This board does have the power to investigate. It's a broad power, and the board has not elected to exercise it in this instance when it comes to other elected officials. So I just want to offer you those clarifications publicly.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Do we have any other public comments from the public? Mr. Beardmore.
Evening, Peter Beardmore, 282 Pleasant Street, speaking on behalf of myself. First of all, Mr. Franco, thank you for your service. I was surprised and taken aback by your announcement, and I'm sorry to hear that you're not running for re-election, but I completely identify with and sympathize with your reasoning. So thank you again for your service, and congratulations on the accomplishments that you've outlined. I would be remiss not to share. I was taken aback by the revelation that was just made by Senator Cronin about the request that apparently came from a member or this board as a whole. I'm frankly not sure what to make of it. As a school committee member, as a school board member, I do not proxy, supplicate, I'm not sure what the right word is, but I don't work for you and you don't work for me. And I don't delegate any of that responsibility to any of you, nor do I do that to the town manager, nor do I have any expectations of any of you to represent me in that regard. So if that has been communicated and responded to in a way that apparently our delegation has agreed to, I would ask that that be publicly discussed and that that guidance be taken up with the Finance Committee and with the School Committee as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. And I do want to, again, our habit is not to respond to public comments, but I do think that since this one's pretty directed towards me, I want to clarify. You know, I understand that I heard Senator Cronin's comments. I want to clarify that when this board meets with the legislators to go over legislative priorities, that is usually a function of the board, of this executive select board. And so what my guidance was to our elected officials, our delegation, was that they should, in terms of who they should hear the priorities from, that they come from the select board, that we receive all of the requests for earmarks, that it's an annual process that certainly predates me, but it's an annual process, and that we need to hear all that. We need to get those legislative complaints, compile them, and put them forth. There is no prohibition on the delegation to meet with other boards and committees. There's just simply no prohibition on it. My preference is for us to meet as a group to discuss legislative priorities. That should not happen in 3 different meetings, that should be 1 meeting. And I would hope that the other members, you know, as is the usual course, you know, come to, not other members, other boards, you know, discuss this in advance, which is why the meeting was communicated, you know, well in advance. That way there would be multiple meetings of the school committee and finance committee, so that way you guys can identify your legislative priorities. You know, that was the intent. That was what was communicated. I think the intent of the meeting, the purpose of the meeting was very well communicated. But there is no prohibition coming from the select board or from me that prevents our delegation from meeting with any other board or committee in town. Do we have any other public comments from the public? All right. Any announcements tonight?
Just that the warrant is open until March 18th at 4 p.m. for submission of articles for the town meeting, which is May 4th.
Okay. Interviews, appointments, reappointments, and resignations. So let's see. Let's hit Kim Duffy first. So Kim Duffy was before us. Oh, I'm sorry. We have an 8:30 appointment that I skipped over. Request from Little League to use Old Primary property for T-ball games and practices. Do we have anyone from Little League who's going to speak to this evening?
Hello, TJ here. Sorry, without the agenda.
How are you, TJ?
Good, how are you?
So we have a request from Little League to use Old Primary School. Do you want to just give us, first state your name and address, and then just give us an outline of what the request is today?
Sure, yeah. TJ Laughlin, 207 Rolling Acres Road. I'm the vice president of the Lunenburg Youth Baseball softball program in town. So we put in a request to use the field near the center for T-ball, mainly because we had talked to the skate park organization and just got some ongoing construction that will potentially start during our season. And so we had discussed as a board and some parents in town that the construction might be disruptive to the younger T-ball families and kids players. So we had put together some options of where we could move the T-ball field to mitigate some of that. So Just to get to it, the thoughts are, we would move the T-ball field to that field, run our T-ball program out of there. And I sent an email with some details, but it would include setting up baselines, moving our storage containers over, which can, they have the bats, the balls, the tees that the coaches would need, and potentially some fencing to block off the field or to cordon off the field a bit. But I think another bit of disruption would be the parking, obviously. I don't think a lot of parking goes on over there, but during the season, we would have parents and coaches park there. So I think that accounts for the majority of what we would need at T-ball. And our season runs, April to June. So it'd be during that time. But we don't run summer league for, summer or fall league for T-ball.
Thank you, TJ. So, we heard the request is to use the old primary school property for these T-ball games. What are the ages of the kids that use T-ball? I had to lean over to Lou to even ask what T-ball was, so.
And he's admitting that.
The ages for T-ball are 4 to 6.
Say that again?
4 to 6.
4 years old to 6 years old.
Got it. So little kids. All right.
Yeah.
All right. I want to turn to the board. Any comments the board may have on this request?
I have some questions. So the first one, through you, Mr. Chair, to the town manager, is the town covered for liability on that property since it is a vacant property and not specifically designated for such a purpose?
Insurance is noted, and that was one of the questions I had, that was, so they'd provide insurance with.
They would need to provide insurance?
Right.
Okay. So we wouldn't have any liability at all?
Correct, they'd need to name us as an additional insured.
Okay. So with that in mind, and then the maintenance, are we maintaining that property, the grass? Does DPW mow that regularly? And
It's, since it's been demolished, the building, and reseeded, I think it's only been mowed a few times since then because the grass had to take root. But that is part of the area that's maintained.
Okay. So on its face, I have no real objection. I have to know more of the details and probably pretty quickly to, I don't think, given what we heard earlier tonight, I don't know if you were on the Zoom meeting earlier tonight with our delegation, but money is not flowing out of fountains in Lunenburg. So if you're saying, is the town have any funding, I would probably say no. So if your organization is willing to pay for the use of it and put in the fencing and all of those things that you mentioned in your letter, if it's just permission you're looking for, on its face, I have no objection.
Any other members?
Go ahead.
Thanks. I had missed the part about the insurance in this document as well, and it was my question. So it looks like everything else, there's going to be temporary fencing. Those are all the things I was kind of concerned about because I know that there's sort of a drop-off over there. I assume that the fencing is going to be, one part of the fencing is probably going to, what happened to him?
You look kind of frozen.
Get him back, get him back.
Yeah, I thought so too.
Yeah, I think
Star
his- I
Trek
think his
4,
video was-
get him back, get him back. Yeah.
This is the dark period.
Here
Wait for the orbit to change a little bit.
Coming on
We'll
now.
come out of the dark period, the blackout period soon.
Wait, that's him, up in there. There he is, okay.
All right, TJ's back.
Dropped out right at the key moment you were speaking. I apologize about that.
Oh, no problem. So I haven't been over to that property in a little while, but I know that sort of where there's a leach field over there, right? Like so there's sort of a drop off. Is that going to be fenced off from the flat? Is that one of the areas where there's going to be fencing?
That's where we were talking. We have a fields director who assessed it. Didn't think it was concerning. Apparently, people on our board grew up playing on that field actually, back in the day, even with that slope. So there's some history of use there that we had talked about, but that was one of the things we were considering, was putting a fence on that backside, if it was a concern, mainly.
Okay, I mean, it sounds like it's all been thought out, so I also have no objections to it.
So I just have two questions. You said it's each day of the week, Monday through Friday. What hours? I assume this is, kind of after work hours?
Yeah, it's after work. So for the T-ball program, we try to, I believe it's somewhere around 5 to 6, 5 to 6:30, try to get the parents time to get there and help coach the kids. So it's somewhere around there.
I went over there today after work and just walked around. It's pretty bumpy. It's pretty sloped too. They didn't have T-ball when I was a kid. The coaches pitched to the kids. So I don't know how hard and how far the kids are hitting the ball these days, but I don't know if there's any concern with them running and fielding on a bumpy. I imagine your normal field is a lot smoother.
Actually, if you've seen the field we use now, it's not the greatest field, to be honest. But we did have a few of us from the board go over there and assess. And the T-ball kids, they actually don't need a lot of space. There's only a few that can hit the fences. They're really good kids that move up and make us proud. But we think there's plenty of flat space. I know it's flat and then it increases towards the back. But a few of us assessed and think.
You're okay with the current terrain?
Yeah.
Okay.
If I may, Mr. Chair, I have one more follow-up question, TJ, and that is, I'm assuming that if you're going to be putting in the fencing and all the other equipment, the equipment storage area, et cetera, that once it's done, your organization would also remove it. Is that correct?
Yeah, we'll take care of what we add and change for sure. And we talk to Chris Ruth pretty frequently and on Lockwood, so we'll be in coordination with them with what they need. We'll work with them to coordinate mowing and work with what the town needs to make that doable.
Thank you.
Selectman Nuzzolo. Join the meeting, so Selectman Nuzzolo.
Sorry if you mentioned this earlier, but do you want this to be a permanent location, or is it just temporary during the work at Marshall Park?
It's a great question. Right now, so the way that we had talked about it with myself, Chris Ruth, and Al Lockwood was for the next couple of years, at least, would be ideal. And the reason we say that is because, we're all aware of the Marshall Park rebuild, redesign, and skate park. And so what we were thinking was that depending on how that skate park influences the T-ball field, it pushes in a couple feet to that fence. And so we had said that push in does the skate park build a permanent fence there and add that cost to accommodate, and then T-ball will be offset by that couple feet. But in terms of disruption from sound and construction, we could move back in after that for sure and have no disruption. And there's no concern there, but a few of us thought that field might actually be useful just moving forward, better experience. But we're open to having that conversation for sure. Not trying to get committed today for permanent placement. We can reassess next year. We'd be happy to do that.
Okay, cool. I mean, I don't have an issue with the request. The space is just vacant, so it would be good to utilize it for something. I guess the only concern that comes to my mind is parking potentially in that area. So I I don't know if anyone else has mentioned it or if that's a concern that others share. So I'll defer to the chair, the town manager, about that.
Yeah, so TJ, first, thank you for coming forward. I don't support your request. And I don't support it for a couple of reasons. So I think that what you're trying to do first is a great thing. You're trying to help the kids out. You're looking for an alternative solution. It makes me wonder if you've considered any other, if you've put this request before the school committee about any school fields that aren't, utilized during this time. I'm concerned about, once you turn a piece of town property into a playing field for schools or for children, that it permanently becomes that, because once you make a change, now you're taking something away from the community. I don't think that we have worked on the disposition of this property, and I think I'm not in favor of it becoming an expansion of Marshall Park. And I'm not, and so the other part of it is liability, is that, you note that you have insurance, but the town has insurance requirements. So I really would like to see the town manager look at those insurance requirements. And if the board is so inclined to move in this direction, which I would not encourage, but if the board is so inclined to move in this direction, that we have a liability agreement with your organization that makes it pretty clear that you and your members and their families and everyone associated with the program is indemnifying the town of Lunenburg from all liability related to this. So I would like to see some kind of agreement, not just the authorization, if the board is so inclined to move in this direction. I think that what you're trying to do is noble. I certainly don't have a objection to there being T-ball in Lunenburg. I do have concern about the grade of the property, about the condition of the property, about the steep slope that's on the back. It's kind of like a cliff in some ways. I think there's a lot of potential for kids to get harmed. I would trust that the parents can mitigate all that stuff, but I think that may need to be a more solid plan before the board can give approval.
That's fair. I don't know if I'm allowed to.
You are. You are.
For sure. Yeah, and I'd like to phrase it as, I would hope the community sees us as also giving back instead of taking. We have a volunteer organization dedicated purely to kids through middle school. And so we heard Kate Berman in previous sessions talk about, in-town youth programs that previously were offsetting potentially some of the impact of the middle school cuts. So that's one of our programs, right? Is the baseball, softball, t-ball programs in town. So I hope we could see it as us giving back by using that property instead of taking it. So I wouldn't say that, but I totally agree in terms of planning. We can work to solidify any plans, absolutely. I am curious, based on your comment, I'm curious if our agreement with the town currently is assigned to fields. Is it specific to fields in terms of our insurance? Like, we use Marshall, Reservoir, McNally. I don't know if our current insurance agreements are field specific. So I'd be curious if that exception makes sense. And if it is field specific, absolutely makes sense. But I guess that's how it would come in.
Yeah, usually on your certificate of insurance, under the additionally insured section, usually when you say town of Lunenburg and all their properties, you're usually covered. Keep in mind, I'm offering an opinion, but you just heard 4 others before me that are all in favor of this. So it sounds like we're moving forward here. I would encourage my colleagues, when the motion is made, to give the town manager some room to verify insurance requirements and just confirm that whatever agreement the town manager works out, that we're protected.
Well, Mr. Chair, if I may, Mr. Laughlin, when do you need to know by to get this prepared? Like, this is the first, you sent us the email, and this is the first meeting we're talking about it, and it's very rare, if ever, that something of this nature would be discussed and passed at one meeting, especially something that may be ongoing for a few months and maybe a few seasons. So when do you need to know by?
So we've started our plans for the older kids. What we're hoping to do is get T-ball situated by, April, which is when we really start our season. So knowing where we put the kids, knowing where we, bring the coaches to do training and do the T-ball kickoff would be useful.
So, Mr. Chair, I would offer that we should put this on an agenda in beginning of March, and ask the town manager and to ask Mr. Laughlin from his perspective to look at the liability. I agree the liability is primary to me, and just for the record, my support of this is on a year-to-year basis. We would revisit it every year. So I have no intention of making that the permanent use of that, certainly not right now. I mean, a few years down the road, who knows? But this will be a year-to-year thing as far as I'm concerned. But the liability is the most important to me.
Yeah, I agree.
All totally reasonable.
All right, so it sounds like where we're at is that we're going to put this on an agenda in March, and between now and then, the town manager will be in touch to work out the liability and exactly what you're planning on installing and what you're planning on doing, so that way, when the board takes this up, that we can understand that more clearly. As Mr. Alonso indicated, and I was noticing several other members nodding in agreement, that it would be, agreement to expire within, the calendar year, that it would not be, would not self-extend. So, again, thank you for coming here tonight. Thank you for the work you're doing with the kids, too. I'm sure a lot of the parents appreciate it. I know 4 to 6-year-olds are a hard bunch, and you have to think outside the box. And so this is you clearly thinking outside the box of how do you meet the needs of the kids, understanding the challenges. Out of curiosity, is your expectation that the field is going to be unavailable this year?
No, so we actually talked, my daughter plays basketball and other sports with Anthony. So we talked, and I've been enjoying some of the skate park meetings. And we actually went with him to assess the impact of there's a bump out in the corner of the skate park that comes into the T-ball field. So we actually think the impact is relatively minimal and we can work around it. There was a question about fencing and making sure that the fence from the T-ball field into the skate park, it was secure, especially during construction, but also afterwards. 4 to 6-year-olds kind of migrate. So we're hoping we could fence that off in the skate park. But this season is mostly about the construction vehicles. There was some talk of concrete trucks potentially being there at certain times, potentially during the times that we were playing. So it's mostly during construction that we're trying to mitigate. But after, and if this decision isn't made to support it, we're going to be running in that T-ball field. We don't have any other choice, I think, but I think we'll safely do that too. We just think it won't be the best experience for the T-ball program, which is one of our most important programs, as it's sort of the growth area of the league.
Okay. Again, I heard my colleagues, generally, all 4 of them were in agreement with this use, so it's just the liability piece that needs to be worked out, and I'm sure that once that's worked out, I'll probably join them in their support as well, especially with the provisions Mr. Alonso noted. Thank you, TJ, for your time. And we'll be in touch on the date and time, and I assure you that since you had an 8:30 this time, you will not have an 8:30, which really meant 9:30. It'll be a lot earlier next time.
That's fine. Thank you so much for the time. We appreciate it.
All right, thank you. All right, let's go to Kim Duffy, 1479 Mass Ave. We interviewed with, somewhat interviewed loosely with Kim Duffy last week. She communicated that she was unable to attend tonight's meeting, and so she is requesting to be appointed to a full member of the Green Communities Committee, term to expire this June 30th. Is there anything?
I move that we change the membership of Kim Duffy from associate to full member of the Green Communities Committee, term to expire, as you said, Mr. Chair, June 30th, 2024.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any additional discussion? It's going to be a roll call vote. Selectman Nuzolo.
Aye.
Selectman Imke.
Aye.
Selectman Alonso.
Aye.
Selectman Franco.
Aye.
And an aye for myself. All right. Next, we have a request from Anna Lockwood at 91 Main Street to to be appointed onto the Historical Commission, and we also have a request from Heather Soroka to also be appointed to the Historical Commission. Ms. Lockwood. And I did receive a communication from Ms. Soroka that Ms. Soroka is familiar to us all, but she's unable to attend as she's a little under the weather this evening.
Good evening, Anna Lockwood, 91 Main Street. I came because I thought I had to go home, but I guess Heather gets a free pass. But yeah, I'm interested in joining the Historical Commission. I sent a letter this morning explaining my reasons, and I'm open if anybody has any questions.
I don't. It's pretty straightforward.
I don't either, but I have a question again, through you, Mr. Chair, the town manager. My understanding over the past weeks, when we've talked about a vacancy on the Historical Commission, was that they were down the typical 5 members, because this town has always had a 5-member Historical Commission. Now, I know that the enabling paragraph in the Historical Commission says it can be anywhere from 5 to 7, and it states it exactly almost in those terms. But
I actually think it's 3 to 7.
Maybe 3 to 7. Okay, thank you. But it's always been historically 5. Pardon the pun. So when it was put on as a vacancy, I thought, oh, somebody left. And then in preparation of here, I looked on the website and everybody is still there. And so I don't understand why we're advertising vacancies and, so I certainly have no appetite for expanding a 5-member board to a 7-member board for no reason that I know of. Has nothing to do with people applying. It has to do with, 5-member board is good. It's 3-member quorum. I don't want to extend it to a 4-person quorum. And 7, the only 7-member board I know of in town is the Finance Committee. And, again, 7 members get to be unwieldy. I've served on things, Charter Commission that had 9, and they just get to be, I don't know. They're just not as productive, and I don't see the reason to have one. So I guess I don't understand why we have 2 applicants coming for positions that I didn't even know we were trying to fill.
To the town manager, do you want to take the question?
About the number of vacancies, is that the question?
Yeah.
So, looking back on the history of this, so I was announcing 2 vacancies up until April of last year, and I received correspondence from Mr. Lasko, who sits on the Historical Commission at that time, asking that I stop announcing 2 vacancies because they preferred being a 5-member board. It had historically been a 5-member commission. And at that time, I discussed it with the board. I look back, it was April 11th of 2023. And when we discussed it, I recommended the only way to confirm that 5-member was to do a bylaw change to make it either one or the other, 5 or 7 members. And at that time, it was just asked to be removed from listing the vacancies at that time. So, but it hasn't been brought forth yet to a town meeting to change any bylaws. So it still technically is up to 7 members.
Right, technically, but it's just allowed. Okay, well, since the warrant is open, I guess I have writing to do this week.
Well, thank you, Mr. Alonso.
Well, again,
I think I'm going to correct you. I'm going to correct you on the boards because I believe.
Before you go on,
I believe this. Hold on, the Council on Aging is
Let me respond to Mr. Alonso real quick. So we're posting on our website, and this is my understanding prior to today, that we were posting a vacancy, and we've been noting a vacancy for about a year now. So while I understand your recollection, we've been commenting on this vacancy for quite some time. And so, and even if you go to the website, it notes that 1 member is down and that there's a vacancy. It looks like a 6-member board. And a six-member board is the same as five, the quorum's still three, right? I mean, so it's, in some ways, so it's still problematic. But I did not, when we received the request, my understanding was that we have at least one and possibly two vacancies. I don't perceive this as being an expansion at all in the committee. My understanding of what happened last year was that they were concerned about making quorum, and that by posting two vacancies, they couldn't meet quorum with their existing members. And so my understanding of the request was to drop one of those from being advertised, so that way it would be a six-member board, so that way they could at least meet quorum. So that's my recollection, and am I incorrect? You want to correct anything that I just said there?
Quorum might have been part of it, but the rest of the correspondence with Mr. Alaska was him going back historically to saying that they had always been 5 members.
May I have the...
Selectman Imke, I think
So-
that's the question.
I was totally confused by this. I thought there were 2 applicants for one position because there was one vacancy on the website. And I actually asked town manager about it, and that's when I learned that there was this minimum of 3, up to 7, which is so bizarre to me. Didn't know that was even possible. I think 7 is a bloated board. I don't see any need to go for a historical commission to go up to 7. They've been functioning with 5, and I think it is important to have an odd number on any board or commission. And I went back and watched the recording from the select board meeting last April where this came up, and the decision was made to stop advertising the opening, with the plan being an article would be brought forward to special town meeting. I think there was a lot going on last year. Didn't happen, didn't get to special town meeting. I would support an article for this town meeting to get rid of that weird language of up to 7 and just define the size of the board as 5.
Yep, but for right now, we have 3 to 7, so this board is able to appoint up to 7 members to the board.
And if we appoint and
We
have
have
an
2 applicants who
article,
are interested.
what happens?
Say again?
If we appoint, if we fill a vacancy, an optional vacancy, I don't know what to call it, and we have an article that goes to town meeting and it passes and sets it at 5, what happens? I mean, 3 of the members, their terms are up in June.
So the town meeting vote would occur before we would do the reappointments. But I don't know if I've thought that one through all the way. And we can always, if we approve this, we can always drop these terms down to 2024, so that way that, the 2 members who request to get appointed, their terms would naturally expire this year. So then that creates 5 vacancies. If that's the choice.
I feel like we're just trying to put it like a round peg in a square hole.
Well, I mean, I think
I don't think
the
you can
rules-
do that, Mr. Chair, just because
The terms.
the composition, it says right in it, it's 1, 2, or 3 years, so arrange the terms.
So, I mean, we have, my understanding of how we are here is that residents at home were paying attention to vacancies. We got 2, talent bank forms provided to us to ask from members who are known to us to ask it appointed into it. It's a commission that allows 7 members. And so what I'm hearing tonight is that 2 members want to propose a change in May to drop the composition down to 5. So you're not comfortable, am I fair to deduce that you're not willing or comfortable appointing into those 2 positions?
Yeah, I think it's been functioning as, I think 5 is a good number. I know FinCom is 7. It's been functioning as 5. I'm not aware of any quorum issues. Have they had, does anybody know? Have they had any issues reaching a quorum with the current 5? I don't know. I haven't. I mean, I went back and looked through minutes, and it seems like they had regular meetings, so I assume they had a quorum.
Like I've said in other things in the past, I mean, I need a compelling reason to want to change something that historically has been there. And if we talked about it last year and it came to the consensus that we should adopt a bylaw, and because of other things that happened, we didn't, doesn't change what the discussion was, that it's messy to have from 3 to 7, which is completely ambiguous and nothing has that. And so, no, I'm not going to make it messier and there's no reason for me to want to expand it anyway. So yes, I will vote against all new candidates, not to expand it past 5.
All right, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, this does create a bit of a mess. Let's put it this way, let me just say this, and I think we would all agree with this. I would not be willing to make one appointment without making 2 appointments, because then there would be an even number on the board. That would not be workable.
Yes.
I have no objection to these 2 candidates in particular, by any means, but this mess, you know, I'm not saying you're a mess, I'm saying the messy situation.
I've been calling my ideas we're crazy earlier in the meeting, so that's okay, you can point to me.
Let's put it this way, I would be willing to do it if the votes are there, but I definitely, you know, there's a situation and there is a history here. So, depends on, I guess, how it shakes out.
You know, I mean, my opinion, I think that I don't agree with Mr. Alonso's sentiment. I agree, I can hear what he says, but for me, I don't translate that internally in the sense of, you know, because I need a compelling reason to change what has been historically done. I mean, I would certainly think that we've had a lot of problems with historical laws and rules that you know, maybe didn't need such a compelling reason to change. But Mr. Selectman Nuzzolo, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, so I was not anticipating this to be controversial at all, mainly because I'm just not familiar with the history of the composition of the Historical Commission. I mean, if we have people who are interested in volunteering and serving, when have we ever turned them away? Especially when they're well-known residents with track records of consistent service. So I don't think that either of these candidates would put the quorum requirements, for example, in jeopardy. We know who they are, we know what their commitment is like. So the way I see it, if someone wants to volunteer, we should encourage it. I really just don't see an issue here, but that's just my opinion.
Well, I mean, I think we've heard the opinions of the board tonight. I'm going to make the motion. I move for Anna Lockwood and Heather Stroka.
May I make a few comments?
You can. I move for Anna Lockwood and Heather Stroka to be appointed to the Historical Commission to a term to expire June 30th, 2025.
I'll second it.
Okay. The open space is 7 people. I believe the Conservation Commission is also 7. The Council on Age is 11 people. And we know we have the Planning Steering Committee, I think that one is it's like 15 people. So, you know, to say it's 5, we are bolstering to 7 in some precedent in town, it's not actually the case. Here you have the town charter that calls for a body of 3 to 7. And you call that a different. Well, we have several committees in town that actually have associate members. You just appointed one from an associate member to a full-time member. So there is not a rule that applies to all members in town, all boards and commissions in town. I think that logic they use is flawed. I'm sorry. And here we have in the charter that it is 3 to 7, and you have 2 candidates. They will not put the jeopardy of quorum in place. So it's either you're either voting against 2 people, 2 citizens that applied for this, or you're not, because following the charter is 3 to 7. So, but you know, and I took the time to write you all the letter and make it clear my thoughts. But you know, the argument that we're bolstering, making this commission any larger than any other committee and commission in town is just not the case. We have several different configurations. The zoning board, I also believe, is a 7 with several members as their associate. So there is not a single formula for committees and commissions in town. So that was my comment.
Thank you.
I just want to do a little more discussion because I definitely see the problem here, but I just want to understand, if we did nothing, there are 3 commissioners who are up in June, is that? Right. Okay. So let's say that an article does go on the warrant, and that article says this commission is now going to be 5 members. Basically, we have 5 members vying for spots in June. And, I mean, even if this is bad from some people's perspectives that we have a 7-member board, if a bylaw passes and it goes down to 5, it's only going to be for 4 months. So that, I just add that into the discussion. I did want to understand the landscape, though. The terms are how long there must be 2 years?
What are these two? 25, so 2
I have
year.
a motion and a second. Is there any additional conversation?
Yeah, I just want to make one comment that I'm basing my decision on, when I went back and watched the recording, there was was he chair at the time? I don't know. Someone from the Historical Commission requested it stay at 5. This board supported it. Plan on submitting an article at special town meeting to that effect of setting the membership at 5, and I think it just slipped through the cracks that it didn't get submitted for special town meeting because of everything going on last year. And that's how, that's the basis of my opinion.
Okay.
May I make one more comment?
Sure.
It's interesting, Ms. Ramnicki, that you bring that up, because, within my letter, I mentioned that, I want to help the Historical Commission to be more active and proactive towards the things that they do. I'll tell you, if I have and Heather can probably attest to that as chair of the Parks Commission, if I have a want of a town meeting article, I'm going to make sure that gets done. So if you tell me that we are down, almost 3 town meetings later, and this Historical Commission has somehow not brought this forward, I think that's problematic, and that is actually one of the things I want to help them with.
I think the plan was for the select board to bring it forward, to bring the article forward.
I have submitted many town meeting articles, and...
Do we have any current feedback from the Historical Commission?
No.
All right. I think we have a motion and a second. Any additional discussion? It's going to be a roll call vote. Selectman Nuzolo.
Aye.
Selectman Imke.
Nay.
Selectman Alonso.
No.
Selectman Franco.
Aye.
And an aye for myself. Please make sure, congratulations.
Thank you.
for stepping forward, and please be sure to get sworn in with the town clerk.
I'll be sure to stop
Mr.
there
Chair, did you
tomorrow.
do both people?
Thank you.
In your motion?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, we're going to go to the town manager report.
Great. I'll start with the board and committee commission vacancies. There is 1 vacancy on the Architectural Preservation District Commission, 1 vacancy until the next annual town election for the Cemetery Commission, 1 vacancy on the Council on Aging, 2 associate vacancies for the Green Communities Committee, 1 member-at-large vacancy on the Open Space Committee, and 1 vacancy on the Personnel Committee. Anyone interested in any of these positions can find the volunteer application form on the website, complete it, and return it to the Select Board's office. And if you have any questions on the roles and responsibilities, you can contact our office at 978-582-4130, extension 144. For employment opportunities with the town, we have the following positions: a part-time conservation administrative assistant, 10 hours a week; facilities custodian, 40 hours a week; heavy equipment operator, 40 hours a week, which this may be filled by the next meeting; the land use director, 40 hours a week; planning board administrative assistant, 36 hours a week; and a temporary administrative assessing assistant, 32 hours a week. And more information on these positions can be found on the town website as well under job opportunities. Just an update on the planning board administrative assistant position. We have hired Josie Gilchrist as a temporary person for that office to be a point of contact until that position is...
Which commission?
For planning board administrative assistant. So she'll be in that office from 9:15 to 12:15, Monday through Thursday. And second Tuesday a month, it will be 10:15 to 1:15. So the planning board chair knows, and the building commissioner, who's been very helpful in keeping everyone in the loop in that building, and Richard Harris, the interim.
An editorial comment, she's all over the place. Where does she get her energy?
I love it.
She commits like 48 hours a day. I don't know how that works. So.
And she started right away. We met with her last week, and she was able to start today. So Annie has been helping out and getting her caught up to speed as well. So she spent time with her today, and the planning board chair was there as well. So it's I think a great fit for the time being. So thank you, Josie. Update on 925 Mass Ave. I had a meeting today with Mass Development and their consultant from BSC Group that will be handling the development of the conceptual plans, market analysis, and the development of the request for proposals for disposing of 925 Mass Ave. We have a site visit scheduled for March 7th and a build-out analysis review with relevant staff on March 14th. We'll be keeping a strict schedule from now until June 30th, as the real estate technical assistance funding needs to be expended by June 30th. As part of the process, we'll be engaging with stakeholders, and information will be presented to the select board to receive input. Update on bids and RFPs. The request for proposals for data collection services for the assessing department has been sent to the assessors for input, and then it will be put out to bid after that. The RFQ for the owner's project manager services for Marshall Park will be advertised, and bids, maybe Mrs. Lockwood left that blank. I'll report back on the due date on that. It should be approximately 4 weeks out. The invitation for bids for a Flat Hill Culvert project were advertised on February 27th, and the bids will be due March 27th, and the bids for the road materials are due February 21st. The electricity supply contract was signed for 48 months at 11.77 cents per kilowatt, and so this is going to be going into effect in November of 2024, and this will be at the expiration of our municipal aggregation contract that we have currently. So it's a lesser
increase or drop?
Decrease. So our current rate is 11.868. So that was good news to lock in for that extended period of time, because electricity costs seem to keep increasing. So that's all I have for tonight.
All right. Thank you to the town manager for the town manager's report. Any questions to the town manager? All right. Old business, these are standing agenda items for environmental qualities and select board bylaws. We're not going to talk about them. Any questions on the budget, fiscal year 25 capital plan, annual town meeting warrant articles?
No.
Current business. Fiscal year 24, third quarter water commitment in the amount of $12,711.75. Do we need to do this as a motion? Do we need to do this as a motion?
Yes.
I move to commit. I move for the select board to commit fiscal year 24, third quarter, $12,711.75.
Second.
Any additional discussion? This roll call vote. Selectman Nuzolo. Aye. I heard an aye. Selectman Imke.
Aye.
Selectman Alonso.
Aye.
Selectman Franco.
Aye.
And an aye for myself. All right, so I'm going to pass these down to sign. The first one has one page. There's 2 documents that need to be signed. All right. On our agenda, we have the warrant for presidential primaries. So this is for Tuesday, the 5th day of March, so March the 5th, from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. For the following, let me just go ahead and read it. In the name of the Commonwealth, you're hereby notified and warned the inhabitants of said city or town who qualify to vote in primaries to vote at A, B, C, D, B1, C1. at 1025 Mass Ave, TC Passios Building on Tuesday, the 5th of March, 2024, from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. for the following purposes: to cast their vote in the presidential primaries for the candidate of political parties for the following offices: presidential preference, state committee man, state committee woman, and town committee. So, I
Move that we approve and sign the warrant for the presidential primaries.
thank you.
Second.
We have a motion, a second, any additional discussion? All right, it's going to be a roll call vote. Selectman Nuzolo.
Aye.
Selectman Imke.
Aye.
Selectman Alonso.
Aye.
And Selectman Franco.
Aye.
And aye for myself. All right, there's multiple pages in here that have to get signed.
Is it just the same iterations, different iterations?
Same thing,
I'll
same
take some
form
more.
multiple times. Next, we have warrants. We have an accounts payable warrant in the amount of $196,710.50. Top goes with the booklet behind. No minutes, warrants, any action items this evening? Committee reports.
I'll just say Stormwater Task Force, we weren't able to meet last week. We're scheduled to meet Thursday.
FinCom meeting, which was canceled because of lack of duly posted agenda. We'll be meeting tomorrow. Town manager will be presenting preliminary budget, 7 o'clock, right here in this room.
All right.
What's this thing?
That's the warrant, it's just a supporting document
Oh.
over the top.
Okay.
Yeah, that's all, it goes together. Of course, I made a comment about Monty Tech, and what does someone hand me? Something about students of color.
Together?
So Renee, just to be clear, all of those go back in that folder? Yeah, okay, okay, okay.
Thanks.
Yep.
All right, we'll take a look at that later. But anyway, all right. The select board met last Saturday at 10 a.m. This is an update. The select board met last Saturday at 10 a.m. to do site walks related to the open space request. Mr. Alonso noted that we had a lot of people there. It's kind of a funny comment, Tom. And we had about 70 or so, 80 people at the first site walk, and then there were a little over 40, including the select board, at the second. So it was very well attended. It was definitely challenging to hear the other members of the board, though. Our upcoming meeting schedule is March 5th, March 12th, and March 19th. And then I heard tonight that we have a caucus coming up at the end of March, so once we get those dates, we can
25th.
re-announce them. Thank you.
25th, yeah.
March
Monday the
25th.
25th. And just, Mr. Chair, I will not be here on March 12th. so.
All right. Any other absences expected this month? No? All right. And Caesar said he's jumping back to the 19th meeting, even though he graduates the day before. No, I'm just kidding. He did not say that. We'll see Caesar in April. Any public comments from the town manager this evening?
No.
Any public comments from the public? Mr. Passios.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Dave Passios, 56 Whiting Street. I'd also like to mention that the Finance Committee is also meeting Thursday, going catch up this week. So we've got our first departmental budget review on Thursday, and we'll be meeting every Thursday for weeks with departmental budgets being reviewed after we get the town manager's budget tomorrow evening. Secondly, I would like to clarify, please correct me if I'm wrong, but the appointments you just made, that commission is created by bylaw, not by the charter.
Correct.
You would never be able to just change the configuration of that committee in a warrant article if it were a charter. It's got to be under a bylaw from your discussions. Just a point of information.
Thank you.
Thank
Do-
you.
Do we have any other public comments from the public? Any public comments from the board?
I'm sure I'll have the opportunity to do this again, but Mr. Franco, I want to thank you for your time on the board. I've only been able to work with you for a year, but I can certainly understand the time pressures that it and life puts on you. So I'm sure I'll have the opportunity to publicly thank you again, but
Thank you. We have 3 more months together, so, but thank you.
I'm not going to do it every week, every meeting.
I mean, once a month is fine, all right?
I would say the same thing, but you know what? I want to leave you the opportunity to mess it up in the last 2 months, so I'm going to refrain from saying anything until then. I will say it's been very good working with you on the senior tax write-off, so that was good, and thank you for mentioning that.
Yep.
And your service already. I have 2 other items of note, and I don't know what level of, maybe because it's 10:15, level of disappointment or disgruntledness that comes with, but it's alarming that this board, only 9-10 months ago, would have a discussion about the composition of a board, and because there were other factors in play and a bylaw wasn't changed, that we would change a precedent against our own discussion earlier to expand a board and not pay any heed to precedent and the reasoning behind why we would do it. Just because it's allowed doesn't mean it's good to do. And with it being so close to the reappointment time, which is only a couple months, I don't understand why it couldn't wait. And so, again, my objection wasn't anything against the people, it was against expanding the commission at all. But that was the second most important one. The most important thing I learned tonight, and this was disturbing, is when part of our delegation at the end indicates that they were instructed not to talk to other members of elected or appointed bodies who play very important roles in the town. And then to hear the explanation is that, of course, that suggestion wasn't prohibitive of those other committees, but those other committees and committees didn't know that the request was even made. So the request that was made, the delegation took to heart that it was discussed. And that there's a cautionary tale there. We need to be careful about what we say in presenting what would seem to be a unified message that behind the scenes wasn't unified and actually surprised people in important positions in town that have and should have equal access to our legislative body, our legislative delegation, because of the charges they have, whether it be to advise the town meeting with financial issues or to advise the town on school department budgets and staffing, et cetera, et cetera. So again, I would be very careful that we hesitate giving these things, especially when it didn't come from a body. It didn't come from a discussion. It came from an individual. And I think we really have to be careful, Mr. Chair, in doing that, because it sets a bad precedent and it sets a bad tone unnecessarily. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments from the board?
I do not.
All right. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Any additional discussion? All right, it's going to be a roll call vote. Selectman Nuzzolo.
Aye.
Selectman Imke.
Aye.
Selectman Alonso.
Aye.
Selectman Franco.
Aye.
And aye for myself. All right, thank you all for joining with us this evening, and we will see you in 2 weeks on March the 5th.